This is our 9th annual symposium, and it is hosted by our Scientific Nutrition Advisory Council, chaired by Dr. Tom Brenna. Would the Science Council raise your hands? Yesterday we had an internal Science Council meeting, and I went around and asked everyone, what their joys were for the past year. We meet once a year. I asked them what their joy was. A lot of their joy is research, working with their colleagues, and really making sure that the omega-3 science is spread wide with public awareness. And so they love this, they live this, and so we thank them. This symposium started with an idea between Tom Brenna and Joe Hivlin. They said, Linda, what if we had a science salon, a seafood nutrition science salon at a bar? And we just can we just talk and have people come?
We were younger then.
And listen to us. And so that was the impetus of starting a symposium. They would like to share their information and hope that others will come and listen to them. So with that, I do want to thank our sponsors for making the symposium possible. Goes without saying, this has been a challenging year, and to make the symposium possible with support from all of our sponsors is very important, and it became even more important this year. So our presenting sponsors are the Marine Stewardship Council, and we're able to be here because they're hosting us today in their beautiful conference room. So thank you so much for that. Our other presenting sponsors are the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation and NOAA Fisheries. Let's give them a round of applause. Our platinum sponsors are Cargill and StarKist. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Then our gold sponsors are the Chilean Salmon Marketing Council, Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, DSM Cornish, GOED Omega-3 Global Organization for EPA DHA, MOE, Regal Springs, and Superior Fresh. Let's give them a round of applause. I also want to thank the speakers, and you have agendas in front of you, all the wonderful speakers that have prepared talks for us today. These talks are meant to be organized like TED Talks, 15 minutes, so that they can be understood by the layperson. Our Science Council can talk for hours, but we want to make sure that you can be able to hear the information in short TED Talk style formats. And I love this symposium because when we gather together with like-minded individuals, there's something that's happening with all of our brains. And I love brain health. And so there's a term of getting on the same wavelength. There's actually, all of us, we have gamma, beta, theta, delta rays happening. And as you start to listen to the speakers, there's this concept called interbrain synchrony. All of a sudden, our brain waves are actually synchronizing together, and there's energy happening. And so I am so excited to see all the energy that is happening in this room right now. And I hope you will be fulfilled from this day and be able to just have a wonderful way of connecting with each other. So with that, I'm going to bring up Dr. Brenna, and I'll introduce him next year. His talk, Dr. Brenna is the professor of pediatrics at the University of Texas at Austin Dell Medical School. And his talk is on seafood and IQ, smart dads, smarter babies, moving FDA formula regulations from 8-track to Claude chats. And for the speakers, take your time, relax. We're all here to just listen to your wisdom. And you've got plenty of time to go through your information today. And we will be monitoring Q&A online. Our communications manager, Corey, will write down some of those Q&As. And Tom, without further ado.
I'm working on, I'm helping out here. Thank you, Linda, and you, presumably can hear me. Not that I need anything, and my wife, who is monitoring this, remotely, says that she can actually, and she can see me, okay. Okay, well, very good. The topic of today, well, the morning topic is on brains, and that's what I'll talk about for 15 minutes, but the overall topic on performance is something that in sort of another part of my academic life is something I've been interested in many over the many years of my time in universities, first at Cornell and then at the University of Texas now. And that has been an ongoing thing, mostly connected to the intercollegiate programs in both places. You can imagine the Texas program is a little bit bigger than Cornell, and but also the whole concept of what you put in your body is actually relevant for performance, and you like not to step too far over the line. Doping control is something I've been deeply interested in over the years too. If anybody's interested in things like Tour de France, we can talk about that afterwards. But today I'm going to tell you a little bit about, in a way, what I did on my summer vacation. You know, it's a little bit the kindergarten talk, maybe first grade, you may have seen something called Operation Stork Speed, which was announced by the HHS secretary and the FDA commissioner. And Operation Stork Speed was something that I ended up getting involved with very right at the beginning. And the reason I chose 8-tracks, and that actually is an 8-track player that still exists in my garage, with a Beatles 8-track and a Cheech and Chong on top. And back when they were young. And the reason I thought about that was that the Infant Formula Act was signed in 1980 by Jimmy Carter, and it was well, Washington being Washington, it took until 85 before regulations were ready and were then enacted. And it has really been pretty much since then that we have the regulations around infant formula, and they really have hardly been updated since then. My AI of choice, well, at least when I gave Linda the title, was Claude. If you haven't noticed Claude yet, and you're a ChatGPT person, well, Claude is really very literate. It writes nice poems and titles and things like that. Now they kind of all do now, but I rather like that. And Claude is named for Claude Shannon, and for the hyper nerds in the room will know who that is, father of informatics and things like that. So that's our 2025 symbol. So, and just to emphasize this point about the story of our updating of things. So it was 85 that we had enactment of the regulations around infant formulas. There was an assessment in the mid 90s that was published in 1998, and they quoting from that document, clinical and basic science studies on the effects of supplementing infant formula with arachidonic acid and omega-3 DHA, which is the fish connection, the seafood connection, are being pursued. The expert panel recommended that the question of requiring the addition of specific long-chain polyunsaturates to infant formulas be reassessed within 5 years. Okay, so that was 1998, and 1998 plus 5 is 2003, and we're in 2025, and so at the moment, we're not sure when the end might be, but at any rate, that was the message, that we were faced with, in June when we started talking about this. I like to point out that in the period 2001 to 2003, those studies were published. It's not like they weren't published; they were published. And so I just picked a couple that were in my archives. 10 studies on term infants, those born at 40 weeks. 11 studies on preterm infants, those born earlier than 40 weeks, earlier than 37 weeks, actually. And then more studies published in 2003. And so there actually was actionable stuff that happened in 2001. And actually in 2001 and then into 2002, we had the FDA agreeing to enable or allow DHA and arachidonic acid into infant formula. That happened, December 2001, and then 2002 began to become available. And still it was only allowed, though moms were paying something like 20% premium for that, and pretty much it went to close to 100% of all infant formulas in the US within a few years. So brain health, and this was all on the basis of brain health for the kids and faster neurological development, and I'll show you a little bit about that. So a nice question would be, where do we sit compared to other regulations in the world? And I pulled this from a paper from 2021. The first author is Susan Carlson, who's in the room. And here is a plot that shows, let me see if I can point. Second. So pointer. Laser pointer. Laser pointer. Yes. Okay. So 2021, and here are various regulatory agencies. There's Codex, which is a European thing. There's European Food Safety Authority, which is here. That's China. That's Australia and New Zealand. There's the FDA. There's Russia. And there's a human milk reference level. And this is for our essential fatty acid, linoleic acid. And so we have requirements for the shorter chain plant-based ones, which have been in formula forever. But then if one looks at arachidonic acid, I really want to point out the FDA number. So the FDA number, there's a minimum for linoleic acid, and there's no maximum. And you notice everybody else has a maximum for linoleic acid, but not us. And if you go to alpha linolenic, that's the omega-3, you see numbers here, but the FDA doesn't have one. We don't have one for omega-3. None, zero. That makes a difference. I'm going to show you in a moment. And then if we look at what's happened more recently, here's arachidonic acid. We have some requirements in China that they're making a requirement for arachidonic acid. And then you'll see the Europeans are making it for DHA. This is our omega-3 DHA. We've got requirements for that. And so you can see my boxes for the FDA are sadly no different than they were in 1985. So we need to do something. This is my real what I did on my summer vacation. So some way I guess when they went around the room and said, "Who are you? Introduce yourself." And I looked into the camera and I said, "Well, I think I'm the fat guy." And they thought that was funny, sort of funny. And so I got tapped for a number of things like an interview. If you want to talk to people in Texas, Fox News is a good place to appear on. And but I got NPR and New York Times, and this is not the limit of it. So this was a bit of things that I was doing. But going back to sort of ask the question, why is this all important? And this was something that I showed. This was a 1984 rapid publication, and this was a study done by one of our heroes in omega-3s, Bill Connor and Martha Merger, and we'll see it very well there. But this is their study, and they fed pregnant rhesus monkeys as the sole source of fat. safflower oil, which is deficient in omega-3, and soy oil, which is not deficient in omega-3. And then they looked at their visual acuity. This is a very sensitive measure as it develops in infants. So they looked at the visual acuity, and they found that the visual acuity in the animals that had omega-3 deficiency was actually quite poor as it developed. The ones that had some omega-3 was much better, and we've got evidence, which I'll show you in a minute, that shows that even more omega-3 is better. So this was 1984. Okay, so we're still a little bit behind the curve here. We had evidence then that supported these things. These are studies that I like that came from the Retina Foundation of the Southwest and were done in the 1990s. And what these show is this a DHA thing? Could it be a DHA thing in human infants? And what this shows is, again, visual acuity, and the scale goes opposite on the last slide, but it's still the Snellen scale in 2020 is average vision. It's actually not perfect vision, it's average vision. And what this shows is that the duration that kids get DHA, we'll just say DHA, the duration in the first year of life actually corresponds to the visual acuity measured at 1 year of life. So the more DHA they have, whether it's from formula, and I hate to say it, but even from breast milk, and there's a breast milk number there, well, that should be a little bit better with the breast milk, but even so, that's what the line looks like, okay? So DHA through this period is related to visual acuity at 1 year of age. So that was another important piece of data. And now I'll move pretty quickly because 15 minutes goes fast. I'm okay. She's supposed to take my time. You don't want to tell me that. Okay. Okay. So that's visual acuity. So what do we have anything more about neurocognitive? And the answer is yes. And there's a couple of papers that I'd like to point to. This was a study that was published in 2022 of neonatal DHA, omega-3 DHA in preterm infants. That they gave kids DHA, I think it was about 60 milligrams a day. During the period, these kids were born, let's say, at about 27 weeks of gestation, out of 40 weeks total. And during that period, they were giving them daily a dose of DHA. And they were measuring other things than neurocognitive in the study. But they went back and they found the kids at 5 years old, and they asked what is their IQ at 5 years of age? And what they found was that the kids that got DHA had 3.5 point IQ points higher at age 5, school age, and that's with no intervention after they left the hospital. Nothing. They just went away, and that's what they got. This is actually really very significant because these kids have deficits in IQ on average, and this made up a big fraction of the deficit, whereas 100 is kind of the average for the population. So if you have around the 92 and now you come up to 95, that's going to make a big difference in kids. So that was a big one. And then I like to point out one of our studies, which took place in Africa. These were in severe acute malnutrition. So this is a little bit different, but again, preterm birth is a kind of a challenge, a metabolic challenge, and severe malnutrition is a challenge. And for these kids who have severe malnutrition, who are between ages 1 and 2, roughly, these are kids that are really in trouble, and they are rehabilitated by being provided with ready-to-use therapeutic foods. And these foods are sort of a packet with peanut butter, non-fat dried milk, vitamins, minerals, and lots of oil, lots of sugar. So they eat it, they love it. But the fatty acid profiles were really pretty bad, actually, originally. Very high amounts of the omega-6 side that was competing out the omega-3 side. And when we reformulated it, and this is a busy plot, but I'll just say that the kids were fed this for between 4 to 12 weeks until they recovered. And so then we sent them home. And then we brought them back 6 weeks later. No intervention during that period. 6 weeks later. 6 months later. I say weeks now. 6 months later, we brought them back and tested their neurocognitive function. And this is the key one. right here, the DHA kids that had some modified omega-6 perform better than the kids on the standard ready-to therapeutic food. So those are both, those last two slides are both about long-term improvements. Okay, so there's some seafood. Why is seafood good? Well, I just tell you all about DHA, right? So DHA is great and lovely and fantastic, but we are actually not just one-trick ponies when it comes to seafood. Seafood is loaded with what have been called brain selective nutrients. So you know about DHA, but the minerals are a big deal. Iron, iodine, zinc, copper, selenium, and there's people in the room who are adding to that list in their heads. Those are just some of them. And you know, the wonderful thing about seafood is that there's so many different kinds of seafood. Right? So I'm from Texas. I like barbecue too. So there's beef, and beef is beef. It's one thing, it's beef. But seafood is like everything, and lots of things. Not everything, it's lots of things. And people can explore that and never get bored. I'm almost done. So what's next on Operation Stork Speed? Well, we just finished the comment period. So if you wanted to make a comment, too late. But September 11th was the end of the comment period. And so we are expecting to hear again to see what we're going to do next on Operation Stork Speed. And that's about as much as I can tell you about what's next. And so here I'm at the end. Overhauling the regulations for infant formulas really is long overdue, folks. That's pretty clear. Seafood omega-3 is a big part of what ought to be the formula, but isn't. That's a thing that is going to transmit to making moms as healthy as possible, and for breastfed kids and as well. And one has to always say that breastfeeding remains the most reliable feeding for babies. We know that. Lessons learned in making formula as great as possible. Notice I didn't use the phrase of the year, make formula great again, because breast milk is great, but we want to make formula as great as possible. But it implicates our seafood as a nutrition machine for moms, and so that's my story.
We have a couple minutes for questions, and for those online, please use the Q&A feature. So we're happy to take any questions you have for Dr. Tom Brenna.
You said there was a feeding relationship, omega-3s and omega-6s. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Sure. I have to be a little technical here. The metabolism of these two families of fatty acids is handled by the same enzymes. But that's been known since I don't know, 1963. And so more omega-6 versus more omega-3, and this is like an ongoing debate that's been going on for 70 years. But the underlying biochemistry is very well established that they don't have separate enzymes. They have common enzymes, and that happens for the fatty acid stage. It happens when they're converted into signaling molecules, which are pretty important too. It also happens for everything. Every step, pretty much. I can think of one or two where it doesn't, but they compete.
Most of the supplements have both. A lot of
A lot of them do. The original fish oils and marine oils will just mostly have omega-3. But other folks will put in more fatty acids. So
For this online, the question was, do omega-3s and omega-6 compete with each other?
sorry, I should have said that.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience here or online? Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Brenna. Dr. Brenna, can you show me how to take this off the laser pointer? Okay, great. Next, I'm going to invite up Dr. Maya Maroto, she's Vice President of Food Mind. Topic is missing out how fish advice may be costing our kids brain power. Thank you, Maya.
And I don't know, is this is working?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Brenna,
Okay, I'm gonna try. Presenting after Tom's tall ass. But I will do my best. So thank you so much for having me back. I guess this is my third time presenting at this conference, and it's just very exciting because as a dietitian, seafood is just very, very near and dear to my heart. I started out my undergraduate dietetics career thinking, I've got to become vegetarian. That is definitely got to be 100% the healthiest way to eat. And then class after class after class, I kept learning about the health benefits of seafood, and I just couldn't come up with a health-based reason to avoid this food. And so sort of the rest is history. I heard Linda speak on a podcast and reached out to her randomly and said, how can I help? And so I've been involved with the Scientific Advisory Committee and S&P ever since. And, you know, I'm just so excited to be talking about this with you all today. And before I dive in, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I've worked at FDA and USDA and throughout academia. And now I find myself at a wonderful company called Food Minds, where I get to really bring all of my nutrition, communication, and food policy experience together for our clients, where we tell stories about food. So we believe that food stories shape health and shape culture. And our mission is to change how the world thinks about food, nutrition, and health. And we don't just tell stories, we kind of make things happen. So this slide shows many of the things that we do at Food Minds to bring change to the food environment and to influence what clinicians, policymakers, consumers are thinking and believing about food, nutrition, and health, all based on strong scientific evidence. So to dive into our topic for today, my talk is grounded in a landmark commentary that was published in the journal Neurotoxicology this year, where 25 leading scientists from around the world came together to share one message loud and clear. Our current fish consumption advice is costing kids their full potential. And I have to say, as someone who worked at FDA, was part of the education and outreach branch where we produced the fish advice jointly with EPA, I know that this commentary is really quite true. So we're focusing our advice a lot on fear instead of on evidence. And by doing this, we're depriving children of essential nutrients in a critical window for their brain development and their eye development. So let's talk a little bit about how did we get here? Where did this fear-based advice come out of? So fish advisories didn't come out of nowhere. They were born out of real tragedies. There was a mercury poisoning event in the 1950s in Minamata, Japan, due to an industrial poisoning event where exposure reached hundreds of times greater levels than what you would see in ocean species with devastating consequences. And there were also studies in the 90s of moms who were eating pilot whale during their pregnancy in the Faroe Islands. So this is the problem. These stories became the foundation for the fish advice that we're giving to this day. And it's driving fear, even though these stories don't apply to fish even. So we're letting ghosts of the past deprive our future generations of reaching their potential. So let's talk about what the science actually does say. So Jean Golding, who is the founder of the Avalon Longitudinal Study of Parents and Children, and Professor Emeritus at University of Bristol, says the evidence has become convincing. Advisories warning about methylmercury have likely resulted in children failing to reach their full neurodevelopmental potential. So what the science actually says in over 30 studies, looking at over 60 outcomes in 300,000 mother-child pairs, shows consistent cognitive gains in children whose mothers eat fish during pregnancy with little evidence of harm due to methylmercury. And as I learned over and over and over in undergrad, fish provides this really unique package of nutrients, as Dr. Brenna mentioned. When you speak about the omega-3s, iodine, choline, selenium, and others that are critical to children's brain and eye development. So we all know when you're pregnant, you take your prenatal vitamin, right? But knowing that you need this, your fish vitamin as well, and that is 8 to 12 ounces of fish per week. Yet and still, the average mom in the US is consuming 1.8 ounces a week. So this is not just falling short, this is a huge missed opportunity that translates into measurable IQ points that are being lost at population scale. So thinking about our current messaging, if you all are familiar with the FDA, EPA fish advice, it really focuses on best choices, good choices, and choices to avoid, and is really framed around mercury and kind of makes fish seem a little bit scary. And you might look at that and just say, you know what? I'm going to avoid all these choices because this looks really frightening. So our current advisories are characterizing fish by mercury level and not by omega-3 content, which is really the important point that pregnant people need to hear. We also have sort of baked in messaging that there's other foods that could substitute for fish, and there's no scientific evidence of that actually being true. So I am challenging the public health community to develop messaging that highlights the absence of harm, the positive effects on children's brain development, as well as reduction of preterm birth. And that is clear and simple, that says, eat 8 to 12 ounces of omega-3 rich fish for children's brain development and reduction of preterm birth. That's really what the advice should center around. So we know that advice that's based on precaution just absolutely does not match the science. So what are the consequences of inaction, of just sort of leaving things as they are? So what we're seeing is that a quarter of women eat little or no seafood at all during pregnancy. And we know that this is the critical window for fetal brain development is during that prenatal period. And then I'm gonna have a higher number than even Tom Brenna had with this 3.5 IQ points, that what we're seeing is that we can have gains of an average of 7.7 IQ points if people who are pregnant reached optimal fish intake. So we're depressing population-wide neurodevelopmental outcomes with this outdated advice. And this 7.7 points, I was like asking ChatGPT, how can I like make that real? What does that actually mean? And so that's sort of like, you have, the curve, and you have the median at, you're scoring in the 50th percentile, you're moving to the 70th percentile. And I know how I feel when my son comes home for the standardized test, he was at 50 versus 70, how I would feel about it. This is what we're talking about. And the other thing Chat told me was that, even one IQ point gain translates into economic benefits for the person, for society. So 7.7 IQ points it's really off the charts in terms of what this means on a population-wide scale. So this is also not just in this commentary from 2025, this is global consensus. So we have advice ranging from what you see in the dietary guidelines to the National Academies of Sciences, World Health Organization, and FAO, showing that and stating very clearly that fish in pregnancy is linked to improved infant health outcomes, including visual acuity and cognitive health, and shows no evidence of harm. So this is really not fringe science, this is global agreement that we have at this point. So what we need to do, when I urge everyone here in this room and everyone who is listening, is to update the message. And I would say to the folks in education at FDA, we need to update that, but I will let you all know that that branch was eliminated as of April 1st by our current administration. So I'm not even exactly sure who I'm speaking to at FDA who could update this messaging. But when there is a chance to update it and we have our structures back together again, we need to update this message to rely on scientific consensus and not old fears, and to equip pregnant people with confidence that they are making a good choice when they are choosing to eat seafood during pregnancy. So I had actually mocked up a mock infographic that would be like perfect fish advice, but I couldn't quite get it into this final draft. So I'm gonna ask, as a former college professor, I'm gonna ask for some audience participation, if you will indulge me. So if we're writing this perfect infographic, what will we want to start with? What is the main health benefit that we're talking about here that you would get if moms ate enough seafood during pregnancy?
Smarter children.
Smarter children. So absolutely, that's what should be at the top of the fish advice, okay? Fish during pregnancy supports baby's brain development and decreases risk of preterm birth. Will we want to tell them that their fish intake is okay? Is it too high? Is it too low? Is it just right? Are people eating enough fish during?
Too low.
Tell them fish intake during pregnancy is too low. Second bullet on the perfect infographic. And then how should we be choosing fish? Based on omega-3. So tell them, choose omega-3 rich fish like salmon, herring, trout, mackerel. And then finally, if we were ending with like exactly the magnitude of what would happen to IQ, we would tell them, do you guys remember the number? 7 points. You can boost your baby's IQ by over 7 points by consuming adequate seafood. So this is the advice that I hope gets out there, and I challenge us all to keep telling this story. So we definitely want to build the next generation and feed their full potential, and seafood has an amazing capability to do that. So thank you for allowing me to go on a soapbox.
Thank you, Maya. We're actually going to have a Q&A session with a few of the authors. We're gonna bring up chairs here, so you'll hang out with us for just a minute. And then for those online, I had a question for Dr. Brenna. Would your recommendation for Operation Stork Speed to be add a requirement in input formula for DHA to be similar to the EU levels? And Dr. Brenna telepathically asked him, he said the committee has yet to discuss specifics. But yeah, feel free to ask your questions online, and then we're setting up chairs here for Dr. Maya Moroto, Mr. Phil Spiller, retired FDA Director of Seafood, and then Dr. Susan Carlson, the AJ Rice Professor of Nutrition for the University of Kansas Medical Center. And so I'm going to hand you my mic.
I think I'm good. Questions for Susan. So, as authors of our landmark commentary, we know so much about this topic. So Susan, the commentary is primarily about children's neurodevelopment. And your work is really a lot around preterm birth. So what's the interaction there between how does preterm birth affect neurodevelopment on these two topics?
Fortunately, Tom Brenna showed you a slide from a study that came out of Australia where the average IQ in those preterm infants who didn't get DHA was 91. I think that's very typical of the studies that are out there. I did a little Google search this morning to see all the different papers if there's anything new, but I think it is just about a 9-point difference for babies who are born less than 34 weeks gestation. And of course, one of the things that we know from the Cochrane review that was published in 2018 and then was updated in 2022 is that omega-3 fatty acids are very powerful in reducing preterm and early preterm birth.
So question for Phil. So in the commentary, the thinking is that fish and seafood in particular is protected against methylmercury. Can you tell us a little bit more about that thinking and the credibility of that?
I think it's fairly credible because it comes from the National Academy of Sciences. And it also comes from a, what's called an expert consultation of international experts that were convened recently by the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization. And independently, they looked at the evidence and they both came to the conclusion that there was no good evidence of harm when pregnant women ate more fish as compared to when they ate less. I saw that and I thought this is historic. I've not seen this before in publications of this type. But then they went on to postulate as to why that might be. And they both independently came to the conclusion that there's in all likelihood a protective effect from fish, and particularly ocean species of fish. And they attribute it to the nutrition, the nutrients in the fish. And although not necessarily to the same ones, the National Academy of Sciences looked heavily at the omega-3s and said that they're likely to be the primary reason. The expert consultation from FAO WHO looked at omega-3s also, but focused more largely on selenium as a possible cause for that. And that's where it comes from. And I think that those are historic points. It shows that science moves along. And I've not seen these kind of comments before, and they're worth noting.
So Susan, our current fish advice does not mention preterm birth. Should it mention that? And how much fish does a person need to eat during pregnancy to have an impact on preterm?
The data that we have today is somewhere around 200 milligrams per day. But interestingly, what we found in our trial, and it was also found in a large trial done in Australia, the ORIC trial, so the ORIC and INDOR trials, was that women who were getting a reasonable amount of omega-3 fatty acids when they were enrolled in the trial did not need a much higher dose. What we found though was 50% of the women in our trial had an intake below 150 milligrams per day of DHA, and those women needed 1,000 milligrams per day to reduce their risk preterm and or preterm birth. So I think it's interesting because it kind of speaks to the idea that maybe we need and the advice on fish intake 8 to 12 ounces per day of a higher omega-3 fish would give you about 250 milligrams per day of DHA, EPA, and that seems to be a nice level for women to be consuming if they are in the childbearing years. We did publish last year, Irene Satan and I are first authors on the paper. There are 24 authors, and we developed guidelines, an international guideline on how much DHA and EPA women should be consuming to reduce preterm birth. And we concluded about 250 milligrams per day for women who are in the childbearing years, with an additional maybe 100 to 200 milligrams of DHA once they became pregnant. But we also recommended that obstetricians review their DHA intake. There's actually an easy way to do that with a DHA questionnaire that has about 7 questions, and you can get an estimate of intake, and then if that estimate is low, that they be recommended to take 600 to 1,000 milligrams of DHA. So these guidelines are very much aligned with what came out of the ADORA.
So, okay, to translate 250 milligrams or 600 milligrams to ounces, or I mean, of it, I guess would depend on the omega content of the fish, but let's say.
That's true. So I think a serving a week, a good size serving of salmon or tuna or trout, a good omega-3 fish, and then maybe another source like shrimp lower in omega-3s, would still come out to be about 250 per day on average. But I personally, I favor the idea of focusing more on the high level.
So is this a question from online?
From online.
All right. Are there any studies with the Japanese/Asian population that examine their high IQ in relation to food?
There are a number of studies coming out of Japan with extremely high study populations, something like the latest one, I think, had a study population of about 77,000. There was one before that that had a study population of somewhere around 80,000. But they were looking at children with much younger ages or thinking in terms of IQ. There, just as an aside, the 30 studies that you mentioned have all studied different aspects of neurodevelopment. Some study IQ, some study motor development, some study vocabulary, some study social behavior, that sort of thing. And off the top of my head, I would have to go back and look to see what the Japanese studies looked at specifically, but they were at very young ages, and they just found the same things that everybody else has been finding. They could not find harm, and frequently found benefits to the aspects of neurodevelopment that they were looking at. And to the point where a very famous scientist from Harvard, Professor Emily Okun, wrote an editorial saying these studies show quite well what we already know. That basically sums it up.
No questions from online, or do you have any other questions?
I think I had one last question, but I think you sort of mentioned it just now in terms of, the studies really, you mentioned they go beyond IQ. So what are those other outcomes beyond IQ that are seen?
In the off chance that I was going to be asked this question, the list is very long, so I have a This is cheat sheet is
I'm gonna ask it.
right on the right page. The cheat sheet is actually an article in the journal Neurotoxicology, which was the first of two articles that I and a group of scientists wrote on the subject. The one that Maya was referring to in her presentation being the second one. And it just goes to show what a dynamic area this is, because in the near 30 studies that we counted as of that time, we counted 51 times, 51 outcomes in various aspects of neurodevelopment, where eating more fish was more beneficial than eating less or none. Now, the number has gone up. My last count is that the studies are now up to 33. And the count is up to 59. So what I'm about to give you only goes up to 51, but it will give you a sense for what I'm talking about. IQ, I think, was about 8, all total, 8 different times where they found benefits. Vocabulary and language development, 8 outcomes, motor development, 8 outcomes, cognitive milestones, 5 outcomes, visual perception, 2 outcomes, attention and working memory, 2 outcomes, learning and memory, 4 outcomes, social, emotional, behavioral development, 8 outcomes, other miscellaneous things like executive function, counting, sorting, 5 outcomes. So it just spreads right through. One of the things that I started wondering about is why do some have more than others? And the basic answer that I give you is the ones that have been studied the most have the most outcomes. It's very simple. The more a particular domain gets studied, the more outcomes they find. Okay, so that's it.
So I guess another question from online, and what we want to say hi to Dr. Jean Golding, who's listening online. So
Questions, do you want to take his first?
How would you change the advice? What wording would you use to change the advice?
I think taking out the fears around mercury, because that's just really not grounded in science, and just thinking about children's brain health and eating omega-3 rich fish and telling people clearly your intake is probably too low. This is something that needs to
Would
be.
you change it to from up to 8 to 12 to at least 8 to 12?
I think it's at least, is it at least up to, I think it's,
Advice is up to,
And you would change it to at least?
well, at least 8.
We
Then up
need
to 12.
data. We need to calculate new advice.
So that I might add that Ann Haynes did a study with over 10,000 pregnant women in the United States. Not a single woman, not one woman ate sixes.
Well, let's just start there. There. Okay, so another question from online to Lee. What is the relationship between selenium and renal?
Interesting question. There are people who have really devoted their careers to trying to answer that question. And, they take the view that selenium in its way is protective for methylmercury, although they flip the idea in that the problem isn't the methylmercury, the problem is that the mercury and selenium sequester each other, they bind to each other, and that produces a reduction in selenium that causes the deficit, that it's really a selenium deficit. Now, there are people who feel very strongly about that. They've done a lot of research. They've devoted their careers to it. Tremendous respect for them. And I know other people that are not entirely persuaded. So I would say that it is a very strong hypothesis. And that's about as far as I'm willing to go at this point.
Let's see, there's a question coming online. Oh, here's Jackie Marks.
Hello, Jackie Marks from the Marine Stewardship Council. There's a lot of talk about eating seafood during pregnancy. I'm curious if there's any research about the consumption of seafood among the father and the mother earlier in life and the impact on child health.
I think that there's a strong growing point of view that seafood should start to be consumed to the extent that it isn't. Well before a woman knows that she's pregnant. If she's trying to get pregnant, start then. If she's a childbearing age, start then. And one of the ways that this idea has come to the fore in recent years is there are a number of studies with dietary supplements, with omega-3 dietary supplements, where the people who enrolled in the study are already pregnant and they're given dietary supplements with omega-3s in it. And to everybody's surprise, you don't find the same benefits that you find with fish. And there's been a lot of theorizing back and forth as to why there is that distinction. And there are a number of possible reasons. And one possible reason is they started late. And that in the fish consumption studies that showed a benefit, the women were already eating fish when they got pregnant. So they were already loaded up, I guess you could say. This is a guy's way of saying.
I might add, I did a study with Daniel Robinson at Lurie Children's Hospital. He's a neonatologist. They had a community study with 1,000 parents. And one of the things that was interesting is we asked how many, really it comes to the point of, is it good to be getting seafood into the household? Because this has an impact on children and whether they begin to eat seafood. And what we found was that women who had the lowest DHA intake also had the highest rate of prior preterm birth. Which is kind of an interesting finding, that again, it's sort of a systematic problem that people who aren't eating seafood don't. There's the preterm birth came up again.
Regarding your question about associated emotional problems with low seafood consumption in pregnancy, the Japanese Environment Children's Study, 48,000 people, found that when women and partners ate less seafood in pregnancy, there was almost a doubling of emotional and physical abuse of the mothers in pregnancy by the guys. Secondly, they found an effect of mothers on their children, finding that low fish consumption also increased infant maltreatment. That is, mothers striking their child or leaving, abandoning them for more than 6 hours, and other specific maternal problems in emotionally rejecting the child.
Lauren McDarris from the Marine Stewardship Council. I was hoping that you all could help with some personal talking points for me. So one of the counter arguments or points that I've heard brought up against some of the research on IQ increases are that, particularly in the US, mothers or individuals that eat seafood during pregnancy or otherwise come from have higher IQs, come from well-off middle class or above families, and so it's not surprising that they have higher IQ babies. So what is your response to that? So that I can hear your response.
Virtually every one of the 33 studies that have looked at the relationship between fish consumption and children's neurodevelopment, including the IQ studies, and actually especially the IQ studies, as Joe Hillman could point out, since he was involved in one, have adjusted their results to take into account the socioeconomic status of the participants, including the intelligence and their education and all of those kinds of things. And Joe was involved in a pioneering study back in 2007, which I confess changed the arc of my career. And one of the things that impressed me was the number of things that they thought of to take into account to adjust their results for in case they were affecting the outcomes. And there was like a whole page of things. And you see that in a lot of the studies. They're very, very careful to make those kinds of adjustments.
Introduce your name.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Van Eisen, a dietitian that works with omega-3 research. I just wanted to bring up, in terms of the question of when should we start eating seafood, something that people aren't really thinking about. There's new work about showing low THA levels in men and infertility rates. It's observational and it's not cause and effect, but there is definitely observational data about looking at low DHA in sperm content in infertility. And most of the infertility work looks at the potential mom, right? But they're starting to look at the potential father. So arguably, men and women of the age who are going to parent children should get healthy intakes of seafood.
There's one more question.
Hi, Derek Gormley with Aquamar. I really appreciate your comments. I wonder about messaging. The question I have is in regards to what learnings we've had around messaging. And, I think we all understand, well understood that risk and fear is a much more powerful motivator for humans than opportunity. And I'm struck by the overwhelmingly positive conversation, which makes me feel great. I'm super happy to be associated with this and share the mission. And I wonder about, though, the communication. And instead of saying your child will be 7.7 points higher from an IQ perspective if you eat fish, has there been any learning around the messaging saying your child's going to be 7.7 less IQ if they don't eat fish? Have we, it's the messaging is so important. Do we have any insights around that? Does anyone have any insight?
I have floated the messaging that if you follow the dietary advice, the advice causes the harm it intends to prevent. It's intended to prevent low IQ and prevent emotional neurological difficulties, but the current advice actually causes it. I'm not a very effective messenger, apparently, because this never catches on.
There's one more question. Oh, behind Gretchen.
Oh, me. No, it's all right.
Yeah, so following up on that question, a lot of my peers are currently, planning their families, expecting, and I'm new to the seafood world. I've been working in the space for about 2 years. This was all new to me. It was very revolutionary to see the science. And when I try to share this with my peers, that I'm expecting, they sort of look at me like, who are you to tell me this, as opposed to my doctor, and then they go and Google and they get this contradicting information. And so I would love to hear from you all resources, places where I can actually send my peers to learn this. I just feel like, they do a quick Google and then they sort of say to me like, okay, well, you're wrong. And I'm sitting in this space and I feel confident that I'm not. So I'd love your takes on
Well, I'm gonna give a plug to our conference organizers, as Seafood Nutrition Partnership is a fantastic place to go for that kind of advice. So yeah, I recommend their resources very, very highly. And
Another question about the, reframing the risk assessment or, coming from developing these sorts of materials for national campaigns. Consumer testing is so important. So that would be something that absolutely, as this is being developed, should be focus group tested and, which one resonates. But I think it's an excellent question and one that should obviously be explored.
If I could just chime in on that, and put in a plug for me. I co-authored 2 articles in 25, including the article that she was referring to, which walk through the science and how we get to the conclusions that we get to. Now, I'm very biased. I had to read a lot of scientific journals. I read and analyzed the 30 that she's talking about. And I don't like it because they tend to be written by scientists for scientists, and they're a hard read if you are not totally steeped in the lingo. I tried to make sure that the articles that I'm involved in are not that way. Because I'm not a scientist, I openly confess that. And so I would be more than happy to send you copies if you tell me where it's in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I would say that the landmark commentary that it is a scientific article, but it is also a pretty easy read. Yeah. So, if your friends could take it, it's like 4 pages and it's really great in terms of outline.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. One,
All right.
Alana.
Yes, hi, this is Ilana Nacker. I'm with GoEd. I have one answer about the messaging. In terms of empowering language versus discouraging language, usually people are more receptive to something that's empowering, like you can give your child 7.7 greater IQ points. The other thing I would say as a pregnant woman, I'm not pregnant, but whatever. You feel like you don't want to be put in a position where you feel like you're giving your child harm. And I feel like with now we're being told not to take Tylenols, we feel like there's a lot going on that let's not blame the moms anymore. Let's try to empower us. The question I had though is about the preterm birth statistics, which I think are so compelling and so important. However, I feel like here in America, it's kind of a big snooze. We don't think it's a big deal. And I know from looking at the data, we're like number 10 in terms of early preterm birth rates, like with the Republic of Congo, ranked with them. And even in the OBGYNs, you don't hear about it until maybe you have preeclampsia. You're already too far down the road that you're at risk. How can we get this to be a more compelling story at the beginning of pregnancy or even before?
Well, I think it's about education, and we've talked about this a little bit at the meeting, that first you get the guidelines out there. I mean, the guidelines were published in ACOG and FM. A lot of people think they're actually guidelines from ACOG, which they are not, but they're published in their journal. I've spoken at ACOG meeting 2 years in a row, and with maybe 200 obstetricians in the room, and we've queried them afterward, and Kristen can speak to this. It's news to them. So this is one of our problems. Once we get guidelines, we have to figure out how to get people to be educated about it. And I would not say we have reached that step yet, but we are working.
I just have one thought, that there's government consumption advice which started in 2001 and exists to this day, has never mentioned it. And that's gotta change.
Okay, I think one question from Chef George. Oh,
Grab it. Perfect. I want to piggyback a little bit more, George Duran. I'm a brand ambassador chef. I'm representing Moe today, but I'm also a communications major. And Dr. Maya, particularly a question for you too. How is the health community supposed to navigate this world of hyper misinformation with incredibly short attention spans that can really get influenced by people who should not have a say in all of this? What is the message to them and to perhaps communicators like myself who know how to reach them to say, look, this is what's right?
I think a lot of it is repetition. People need to hear things more than just once, and just, hearing this message very clearly. To sort of cut through the noise would be one way, but I think we're in a really challenging information environment right now. So I think it's just making it simple and basing it on science and getting it out there over and over as much as we possibly can. Yeah.
I know we have more questions online, but we're gonna take them after next break, but let's give a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, next up, the theme for this year's symposium is Powered by Seafood, and there's been also a new consensus study that came out on sports. Look at that, controlling the camera. Okay, so we invited a sports dietitian, Leslie Bonsheet, to be here, and before she comes on board, she had a conversation with NBA legend Detlef Schrempf. He is a founding board member of Seafood Nutrition Partnership, and they had a conversation about sports performance and recovery, and it's really enlightening, and I understand why he continues to be a legend. So let's bring that up. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Deb. I am so excited that we are going to have this conversation about fueling a body even when one is done playing professional sports. And I'm going to get into asking you a lot of questions, but I think this really dovetails beautifully with the profession that you are in right now, where it is investing. And so that investing isn't necessarily from a financial side. This is the self-investment for your ROI, is what are you getting out of it and why do you do these things? So let's just dive right into this. And, as a starting point, I think for our audience would love to know, and I'm nosy, so I want to know too, is tell me when you played. So when you were a professional player, what kinds of foods impacted your performance on the court? That's the first question.
Well, thanks, Leslie. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about speaking of just in general about health and wellness, and like you mentioned, the investment side, having money to live a thoughtful, productive life is important. But if you don't have your health, it doesn't really matter. So, the question you asked about, what I did way back when, if I can still remember that, I wish I had someone like you to help me out along the way. I think to some degree I was fortunate that I couldn't, or I noticed that I couldn't eat like a lot of my teammates did. When I was in college, high school is a whole nother story. That's basically just surviving, eating whatever you could find. And even partially in college, I didn't have any money, so I could not go out and shop for healthy food. It was basically wherever you can get a free meal, whether it was a burger or whatever, you just fed yourself. And in college, I remember our pregame meal was a huge T-bone steak and a baked potato with all the fixing, because people said you got to load up, protein, carbs, and so once I got started in the pros, it was similar the first couple of years. You just ate whatever you wanted to. I was young and dumb. But I noticed later on, a few years later, that when I didn't eat well, so when I did go out and ate the burgers and had a handful of beers or something, I was not as productive the next day. And and I had always had an issue maintaining my weight. Practicing and playing a lot, so burning a lot of calories. So I was at a stage where I was feeding myself with tons of protein shakes, and just putting all these calories in me, and my stomach was always upset. So, I paid a little bit more attention to it, and I got away from doing a lot of dairy, doing a lot of beef, and picking more cleaner proteins, which was chicken and fish. I was fortunate enough that I love fish. My wife and I, both from Germany, but we've traveled the world. We've been everywhere. We've tried every food. We like every food. I would say 95% of it. So I had no problem, eating raw fish, sushi, or whatever it is over the years. I think that was just extremely helpful that I realized I feel a lot better when I eat clean. Um, and and I never liked fried food. I didn't like all the fried fish or whatever. So from that regard, I think I was just fortunate that I had a certain taste for what I liked and what I didn't.
And I love what you're saying, because I think a lot of times when people think about eating for performance, is they categorize food. This is good, this is bad, this is healthy, it's not healthy. But I think the more important thing that you said is, how does it feel in my body? Because if our body doesn't feel good, it's really hard to optimize performance. And that, to me, I say it all the time as a sport dietitian, we have to personalize to figure out what works for us. And sometimes that idea of what traditionally it was the pregame meal, like, oh, enormous. Now get out there and run up and down the court, and your body's like, what are you thinking? What are we doing? And so that lightening of the meal and the difference and having more fish, what a great thing. It's still that wonderful amount of protein, but without all the added things that tend to bog the body down. So I think that that's so critically important. Oh, another question for you is, after games, so what would your routine typically be? To me, this is the really telling time, is recovery, because right, we're in a state of prepare for, repair from. There's no third door. Those are the doors. So did you have any particular strategies that you use from a recovery aspect?
I think I could have recovered a lot better if I actually had input. But I was kind of like the trial and error guy, right? Because again, early on in my career, you'd eat whatever you could find. I was fortunate enough to invest in a couple of restaurants here in the Seattle market. I remember going to one of those restaurants, which is a steakhouse, after weekend games when we had a babysitter. You roll in there at 11 p.m., you eat a 16-ounce steak with everything and appetizers and all that kind of stuff, right? And thankfully I was still fairly young at the time, but I knew the next morning was always a sluggish practice. The red wine probably had something to do with it, but it's those things where you didn't really know. We didn't have a nutritionist. And even later on in my career, when we did have a nutritionist, the training table, the last 2, 3 years, it was still all carbs. It was, tons of pastas with sauces. And it was like, you guys got to load up. You guys got to load up. And, I had plenty of teammates who would not eat that food, but rather go through the McDonald's drive-through. And I'm still going, how do they compete every day? I'm not one all-star teammate who literally drank every day, right? He drank Crown every day. And I'm kind of going, how do you operate, right? How do you achieve your best? And their argument was, hey man, I'm an all-star, right? And you kind of go, yeah, but how about long term? Can you maintain that? You have all this talent. Can you maintain that for the next 2, 3, 5 years? Could you play 5 more years because you're maxing out, what your body can do? So I always looked at that I had to max out my physical being, and didn't feed it the right way, or my career would have been a lot shorter. And that just transitioned into maybe a healthier lifestyle, and also realizing that, hey, if I want to be healthy in my 40s, 50s, 60s, I got to make some compromises.
I love that. And again, I think that that is so important because that's future casting. That's what that is. It's not, I'm just not thinking about the moment and what's happening now, but what is going to sustain me. I'm all about sustainable. We talk about that a lot from a nutrition perspective and environment perspective, but it's self-sustainability. Am I doing the things now that are going to enable me to do the things I want to do when I get older, right? To be the husband you want to be the father you want to be the professional you want to be. All of those things require that we've made that investment in our health, and that attention to detail that you put forth, that has nothing to do with your talent. That's just, okay, it's above and beyond what's happening on the court. So I think that's fantastic. So you kind of alluded to this, but if we could go back in time and think about from the beginning of your professional career, of your collegiate career, if you could change it, rewrite the script, what would you have done differently from a nutrition perspective?
Oh gosh, not just that. There's so many things, right? I don't have any
A
regrets.
life perspective is like
Yeah, I said I don't have any regrets of how I attacked it, because I feel like I gave 100% of my ability, right? I worked hard at it. I did the research I could, trying to figure out how could I maximize what I had. But it was very limited. So definitely on the nutrition side, actually having a plan, because even if you eat fairly healthy, and that's all relative, but thinking back 30 years of what was fairly healthy is probably nowadays going, oh my God, you ate that 3 times a week, right? But if I could go back and say, if I had that, maximized that, and also figured out how to incorporate that with proper recovery, because there are days where, you didn't feel like you did anything wrong, and you showed up at a game and you literally operated at 60% of capacity because your body was just done. We play 4 days in a row, 4 days and 5 nights in 4 different cities. And even though you might have tried to sleep and eat well, your body was just done. You couldn't even get your heart rate up, and you were sluggish, and just trying to, coordinate all those things, travel, nutrition, rest, and the same with, proper training. The way we trained back then, nowadays, nobody trains that way. Probably that's why all my joints are a mess, right? Because we lifted like football players, all those things, right? But nutrition to me is the key for, I can replace, which I have some parts of my body, but you can't replace your engine, without some major setbacks. So, nutrition to me going forward is probably the most important thing.
I love that. And I think what you've just said also speaks to the point of it takes a village, right? It isn't just one aspect of play, it's everything. Did I do something to get myself ready so that I can play through and recover? Because guess what? I have to do it again tomorrow, and maybe I'm on a plane, and there's all these different variables that are there. And it gets to that point of what I find a lot of times people say nutrition, it's just food. Well, let's think about timing. How many times a day do you eat? How consistent are you with that? What's happening with your hydration? What are you doing in terms of sleep? It's not one of those. It literally is it's a whole team within one body trying to figure this out, to have everything going in that same direction. And you've just said that beautifully, that indeed that is the case, and not just through playing days, for life. We're kind of establishing that team for life. So now, not playing professional basketball anymore, but what do you do now in order to maintain that healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, it's again, I'll try. Nothing is perfect, and especially when you travel. I travel a lot for work and also for pleasure. It's, you go through an airport early in the morning, there are just no good choices. I don't care what you say. Especially I have some restrictions, where I don't do gluten or I don't do dairy, and So you run into stuff, okay, I am hungry, I got a big body to feed, I got to put something in me, and all right, today's a compromise, I'm just gonna eat that and live with it, right? But overall, I noticed that, first of all, I don't drink much anyways, and I feel much better when I don't drink, so I limit myself quite a bit. Um, I like a good glass of wine, but if it's more than one and a half, I don't sleep. So I try to restrict myself, and that sometimes is not fun because you're in a fun setting with people having a great dinner or party, and everyone is like, the final one more or whatever it is. And I kind of go, I'm going to sparkling water, right? Because I love my mornings. I love getting up, being sharp, having my cup of coffee, and ready to go. I don't like to be sluggish. I don't like to sit at work. I'd work early in the morning. I'd go through my emails, and I don't like to reread my emails because I forgot what it said. And it's not that I had too much to drink. It's just that the older you get, there's more fog around you. Or you go to dinner and everything that's served is stuff you usually don't eat, but you're hungry and I'm going to eat it. And then I notice I don't sleep well, and I'm feel in the morning like I've actually had, too much to drink. Um, so it's maybe not as fun. I see other people not doing it, and they say, "Hey, I'm feeling great," and I go, "Well, maybe it's genetics, so maybe I train myself to to live this way." But I'm willing to make that compromise because I love my mornings. I love being active. I do something almost every day, whether it's a workout, a spin bike, lifting. It's something, right? Or just walking the golf course. Just keep moving. To me, is keep moving and fuel yourself with decent stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect every time, but fuel yourself with the right things, and I think it just hopefully lasts longer. Where I don't want to be sitting on the couch every day when I'm 70, right? I want to keep moving, so that's my goal.
I love it. Living swell. I think that's the goal for all of us. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about doing the things that we can and what we can control. This hand to mouth activity, the sleeping activity, the moving activity, nobody else can do it for us. We make that choice. One of my mottos is always, I am keeping on. It's not about keeping up with everybody else, but I'm keeping on to allow myself to do the things that I want to do. So I love hearing that from you. Okay, so kind of the last question is, what do you love about having seafood?
Well, I think I'm lucky that I enjoy the taste of probably at least 90% of it. Every once in a while you have the fishy mussel or clam that you kind of go, well, that's not good. But I love the taste of, last night I took some WNBA players to dinner that are in town, and I took them to my favorite seafood place here in Seattle, and Linda knows it. And they all had black cod and they had salmon and tuna, and everyone's like, wow, this is amazing, right? And even though don't eat seafood every day, they really appreciated how good the food was. And yes, being at one of the best restaurants in Seattle is not like you go into the store and fixing your own food, but to me it's like I love the taste of it. And prepare it the right way. We do a lot of salmon because we're in the Northwest, and in the summertime, we like to barbecue salmon or cook it in different ways. And that's one. I think it's also, we have a challenge in the whole world of how do we sustain not just seafood, but overall, how do we feed our people, right? To me, figuring out how we one is feed our people, but also make seafood sustainable is a challenge, but people are up to it. They're working on it. The farming is getting better and better. And when you have the snobs tell you, "Oh, I can tell you what's a wild salmon or what's a farmed salmon," I go, "Well, let me cook both of them for you, and you tell me which is which," because it's all about how you prepare it, right? It's almost like somebody can tell you what's the difference between $1,000 bottle of wine and $100 bottle of wine, and tell you, well, there may be one in a million snobs that can figure that one out, right? So I think those are the challenges we have as a race. How do we feed our billions of people? But seafood, to me is a way of making it sustainable, and nutrition is the key to all of our health. So
I love talking with you. You are truly an aficionado, and really living this life of being Seaficient, and also, and I really right there with you. It is about the give to, give back, give on, because I think for all of us, that's what's going to bring us all together. Yeah, less of this enragement and more of the engagement each and every day. I think that's the recipe for living a healthy life. Deb, thank you so very, very much. I love chatting with you.
thanks for having me, Leslie.
Thank you so much for that. That played 16 years in the NBA and still involved with Seafood Nutrition Partnership. Some of you met him in our Seattle meeting in June. And now I'd like to invite up Leslie Bonchi, the sports dietitian. Some of her teams that she coached were Kansas City Chiefs, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Not anymore, which is why they're playing so dreadfully. I spent 31 years working in the NFL and then decided I needed to work with real people instead of them. But I always thought, wouldn't it have been a cool thing, and now I'm gonna change the way I say it, of leaning over the goalpost, dangling a salmon fillet saying, come to mama. I mean, come on. I think it might have made a difference. I've been in this field for a long time as a registered dietitian and probably 35 years of that as a sports dietitian. And I really do think we are the influencers when it comes to working with athletes to try and move the needle to helping them optimize what it is that they do in the land of the crazy influencers of what they're hearing out there, which is really more about the fear factor. We've talked about that already this morning. Don't eat this. What were you thinking? Get it out of your mouth. That's not helpful. The other thing is that for athletes, a lot of time it's a neck down phenomenon, thinking about how this is going to make me bigger, faster, stronger, etc. And they're not thinking about the neck up. And that was part of the dialogue this morning, and certainly continues to be part of the dialogue as we move forward. So, this idea of being Seaficient is, something we use the words that encourage people instead of discourage people, and setting up some healthy competition around the training table. Not a bad thing to do, but that means familiarity with food. I'm a very big believer in this, of helping people convert from foodies to foodie. What are they going to eat instead of the other way around? Because if they're not eating it, it's not food, it doesn't work. So when we think about that nutrition prescription for our athlete, we really want to think about what those benefits are for health and performance. And I will tell you, when it comes to people that are active, whether they define themselves as athletes or active individuals, they usually want to focus on performance first. So number one, and then the health is down the road. When you're at the end of your career, is, oh, now I'm no longer involved in sport. And then they try and do things a little differently. Okay. I'm very used to talking to guys that are much bigger than I am and don't know this. Telling you all about this. And this idea of being able to translate that science to something that is practical and doable and achievable more than once, but over a period of time, because practice makes perfect. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of kind of the from the sports nutrition spiel of what I think is very, very important and how I would define performance nutrition goals to be, because there are a lot of different things. So as you heard Jack mention, and I say this all the time, is when you are active, there are two things that are happening. You're getting ready for what you're going to do and preparing for what you did so you can do it again. Sometimes that's the same day, like a two-a-day. If you're a swimmer, you might be in the water early in the morning and then dry land in the afternoon. Just is that way. We think about equipment that athletes use. Basketball players don't really have a lot. Swimmers, it's the Speedo and goggles and maybe a hat, and that's all, to being very, very equipped. As hockey, that all of the things you have to wear, that's your external gear. The internal equipment is the food and fluid. Somebody is not equipped to do their sport if they are not thinking about their fueling and hydration. There's no workaround with that. There's no shortcut. That needs to be part of the dialogue.
So this idea of the fuel kit is really what is the athlete's advantage, their nutrition advantage. I worked in baseball for a long time, and when I started in baseball was right when some of these stimulants were banned. And I had players saying, oh my God, how am I going to energize myself? FOOD, it actually worked really well, we knew, but these are the types of things, they're so used to doing things a certain way, and now you have to make it something for. Unfortunately, we see that coming back with a lot of products marketed as energy products that have 0 calories. That's an oxymoron. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to have the calories in. We talk about consistency, and to me, that is the most important thing that athletes and active people do, are being consistent with the number of eating occasions that you have every single day. Not, a crazy amount of differentiation over the course of the week. We talk about the quality of food choice. A lot of athletes, they like that. Think about the quality of what is going into the body. Does this food contain omega-3? Is this food a source of a high quality protein? Does it help me to achieve my micronutrients, not just the macros, the micros? We think about the quantity consumed. And again, many, many years, I'm going to write the book now that I'm not working in it anymore, about things that players do and players that would show up with 6 flank steaks on their, why not 6 pieces of swordfish? I mean, come on, let's think about this for a minute. Quantity, sometimes it gets over exaggerated. Sometimes there are athletes that eat far more than they need, but we also see the other end of the spectrum of LEA, low energy availability. And it happens not just in female athletes, it happens in male athletes as well. They have to optimize, otherwise their performance will suffer and the injury rates go up as well. We think about the distribution, how food is consumed over the course of the day, and that certainly has been looked at regarding protein, that it's not little and eat an entire tuna. It is dividing it more evenly over the course of the day to help with muscle protein synthesis. I've never met an athlete yet who said, I want to be the weakest, slowest, and tired before I start. That isn't usually what they're trying to do, but if they're eating in a way that doesn't help them to achieve the goal, then it's time for some tweaking. And then the idea of supplement savvy. That doesn't mean no supplements. It needs to be part of the equation because this is what athletes are bombarded with all the time, but oftentimes they don't know what it is to choose. And they need some guidance with things that actually, A, help to correct the deficiency, help to optimize performance, help to fill in the gaps. So from the athlete's perspective, what do they want? You heard a little bit of this from Ted. If the food doesn't taste good, it doesn't get eaten. That's the reality. There has to be flavor to the food. There have to be foods that are around. They are accessible and available. And any more affordable. Need to be part of the conversation as well. Athletes are busy people. There's lots of moving parts. They might travel all the time, be it bus, plane, train, automobile, the whole thing. And so there needs to be a way to have foods that are affordable, non-perishable for them. And that's particularly true in the pro on the go, the protein ideas. It's very, very hard to carry a piece of chicken around all day long. That's a food safety nightmare. If we use fish that is in a can or in a pouch, that oftentimes works beautifully. That is the portable protein that can help to get the needs met over the course of the day. The other thing about that is when we think about taste preferences and a lot of things that are out there in the protein space, to say this with powders, bars, etc., they're all sweet. All of them, with the exception of something marketed as a jerky bar. Everything else is sweet. So when you have portable proteins that offer the savory, that's what canned fish does. That's what a pouch does. It provides another way of being appealing to that athlete's palate. They also want foods that feel good in the gut. And you heard Detlef say that, and that's really true. And that isn't something that athletes are oftentimes going to talk to their coach about. But they are going to talk to the sports dietitian about that. I don't like the way that feels. It makes me feel heavy. It makes my stomach upset, etc. So it has to be food that you don't just check off the box for. It has macros, micros, phytos, etc. It's the gut comfort level is first and foremost. Athletes are certainly concerned about foods that optimize body composition. We don't really talk weight management. It is optimizing body composition. So is somebody able to increase their muscle mass, decrease their body fat, or multitaskers? You want to do it all. It's just kind of the way it is. and the kind of thinking about foods to contribute to optimizing performance. Many of you might be familiar with the PED, performance enhancing drugs. No, it's PED, performance enhancing diet. That is what we are looking for. It's a lot safer. You don't miss time in your sport. So it really is something that tends to resonate well with athletes. So why seafood? Well, there just been a study published very recently in the Journal of International Sports Science Nutrition, JISSN, and talked about a lot of the benefits specifically for athletes, and not just for athletes, for everybody. But what might seafood do for somebody who is active? It is improved cardiovascular function during aerobic exercise. That is not the same as saying to somebody you're going to have a healthy heart. They don't really care when they are on the field. But if indeed I'm doing something that is optimizing blood flow, that is maximizing endothelial function so that I can do what I need to do at a high level when my body is moving, that is the aha moment for the athletes. It may indeed translate to enhancing endurance capacity. Now, certain sports, that's more important than others. Football, not so much. Play 30 seconds and you stand still for 10 minutes. Very strange. But in other sports, soccer, basketball, hockey, you're moving constantly. You want to be able to take it up to that next level continuously until you have a break. Indeed, the benefit of the omega-3s in helping to improve strength, but that is in conjunction with strength training. It's not by itself. That's a yes and. So the RT, the resistance training, along with the consumption of omega-3 containing foods. There have been some studies indicating that indeed there may be the measures of decreased delayed onset muscle soreness. So feeling less sore after a workout. That's not everybody who's seen that, but there are athletes that have reported that. And that usually, that's part of that repair front. So you can do it again. If you're overly sore, it's really hard to do it again. My eldest daughter-in-law just ran Berlin Marathon on Sundays, dropping like flies because it was 80 degrees. It was really not comfortable. So I'm texting her messages, need to do this. It's a good thing having a sport dietitian for a mother-in-law. And I'm a very nice person. So there also happens to be a positive impact on immune system function. And this is one of the things that I have seen throughout the years of working with collegiate athletes, professional athletes. You start preseason, everything's great, feeling good by the beginning of October. The cold, the cough, the flus, kind of the gift that keeps on giving over the course of the rest of the season because the body gets burned out, broken down. And so indeed, if there are things that we think about that help to support a healthy immune system, that is critically important. Oh, and by the way, the food as well. So again, a lot of added value benefits. There may be some impact in terms of the inflammatory mark, stopping that inflammatory cascade. That kind of goes along with sport and overtraining, but it's the extent to which that is, the magnitude of, and if that can be somewhat truncated, alleviated by what it is that one's consuming, rather than the option always has to be some kind of anti-inflammatory in a medication, I'm going to do things on the proactive end with the food that I'm consuming. There may be neuroprotective benefits. However, it seems to be primarily in those who have already had repeated head impact when it comes to traumatic brain injury. So although it'd be very exciting to say if people do this on the front end, then that's going to minimize having a concussion, we can't say that because we don't know that that is true. I think helmets and other protective gear is really important, and maybe not fighting with heads. That might indeed decrease the risk of concussion, but there may be some benefit on the other side. And improve sleep quality. And one of the other things that was seen in this review was talking about gut health, primarily because the omega-3 fatty acids actually function as a prebiotic. So adding some other benefits for athletes. So we think about the how, and specifically related to sport. When it comes to omega-3 use, it does help in terms of training adaptation. So you have somebody who might cycle or run better with more efficiency, that idea of the economy. You know, the idea of enhancing resistance training so that somebody might be able to lift more when they are including the omega-3. That means we're still lifting. It's not just a lifting before to now. We have to be doing the strength training workouts as well. From the brain standpoint, the neuroprotective effects, and that is critically important, right? Athletes are not just neck down. We want them to be able to think and function well. For my athletes in college, they are students first, athletes second. They have to go to class. There are things they need to be able to accomplish. They need to be able to think. There may be that reduction in fatigue and improved mood. And all of those things are critically important when we're looking at mental health and quality of life for people that are physically active. And then the idea of recovery. And there are some studies that have looked at this of a better job in terms of maintaining muscle mass after injury, which usually tends to happen if somebody is immobile and then they're going to be losing muscle. So the extent of that muscle mass can somewhat be modified by what's happening with eating. So you have somebody who's not quite so debilitated, and that's oftentimes a big concern. Hear it from athletes. There are probably several of them over the weekend for many teams, Achilles, ACLs, etc. You know, nobody bothers me on Sunday for football day, and I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm just going to watch and tally up the injury. And certainly the idea of this recovery is so important. Talk about that always, because if somebody doesn't recover well, then they're not going to be able to push themselves the next time that their body is physically active. So, this idea of the why the try, what's the ROI? From a performance and health standpoint, if we look in the middle and we see the omega-3 fatty acids, we see on one side it is improved performance, and on the other side it is enhanced recovery. Both of those things is what we are looking at. Now, there are some athletes that want to focus on physique. Okay, that's fine. But again, everybody loves the word performance. That's a positive word. If you're doing things in terms of your eating that will help to optimize your performance on some or all levels, then you usually get a buy-in from the people that you're talking to. This is it. We're really trying to find what is compelling for them. So whether we're looking at neuromuscular function, whether we're looking at muscle, whether we're looking at helping if somebody has had concussion, if we're looking at supporting that healthy immune system, so you're not going to maybe miss your end of season because you're ill. If we're looking at minimizing oxidative stress, that doesn't take anything away from the demands of exercise, but it's having an impact on the other side. So maybe I can push my body more, and I won't pay the price of being injured or being sick because of what it is that I'm doing. And this is actually a study that looked at ranking the strength of evidence on different types of sports and the role that the omega-3 fatty acids may play. So the first one is looking at strength training. It is the impact on helping with cell proliferation and protein synthesis. That's the reason. But again, not either or. Yes, and. So yes, you have to be doing the strength training, and there may be an additional advantage of using the omega-3. That's also using protein. I mean, it's a lot of things together, and this is a score of 5. So there's still more studies that are being done, to make it a little bit more robust. From the endurance athlete, it is minimizing flu. It is helping somebody to be able to breathe more efficiently when their body is exercising. It is minimizing the production of the free radicals or that oxidative stress. That's the reason for the omega-3s. When it comes to mixed or team sports, it is reducing that post-workout soreness when people are just kind of like aching along because their body hurts. Now, if you've been, tackled by somebody who weighed 300 pounds, you would probably hurt too. It's not going to be a lot of fun out there on the football field. That's collision nutrition. But we do talk about those things that might make a difference of what should be in those post-game meals. And maybe what shouldn't be there quite as often. Alcohol, but nobody really likes that answer. But when we have athletes that are immobilized because of injury, if it is stress fracture, if it's ACL, PCL, MCL, whatever, it is prevention of that muscle wasting to help them get back to what they want to do. We can't change the immobilization. If somebody's in a cast, that's the way it's going to be. But we certainly can change what it is they choose to eat and change that verbiage to one of action rather than inaction or frustration. And then when we look in combat sports, for those that have had concussion, again, that possible support for the plasticity of the neuron and functional preservation. These are the things that we're looking at, is retraining, Less brain strain, more brain gain. That's what we want to see. All right. So reeling them in, all right, the why to try seafood. It is the macros, right? That is the protein and the omega-3 fats. It is the micros, the variety of vitamins and minerals that are in those food items with brain and body benefits. The proscription for muscle preservation. Protein is a hot commodity right now, but not all proteins are conferring the same benefit. This is a selling point when we're looking at the benefit of seafood. As I mentioned, this idea of fish feeling lighter in the gut, potentially easier digestion, it's lower in fat, it still has all the protein that's there, so it kind of checks all the boxes. The idea of pro on the go with can or pouch options to make it easy for people that are physically active. And that benefit of the omega-3s for heart, for cognition, for vision. You know, all these things are very, very important. So we think about the omega-3 fatty acid recommendations, and you've heard this already, is at least 2 fatty fish meals a week. Well, when we look at professional sports teams, they oftentimes have unlimited budget, and I will say that fish, particularly salmon, that's usually the one that everybody likes the most, is on the table. Not every day of the week, but a lot of days out of the week. Now, when we're looking at maybe a D3 school, not so much with fresh salmon, because of the cost, but there's salmon burgers, there's other ways of doing things to get that omega-3 on the plate and into that body. The idea of the 500 milligrams of EPA and DHA daily, and the idea of ALA, right, we know that that also is a source, but is the conversion. This is the concern. So we're not saying that people should not have flaxseed or chia or all these types of things, but there are other things that they need to in order to optimize the amount of EPA and DHA that is derived from the diet. So 2 to 4 grams of omega-3 is what that recommendation is per day for athletes. However, needs aren't being met. Heard that a little bit already this morning. A study in 2019 of 1,500 NCAA D1 athletes that their average omega-3 consumption was less than 150 milligrams a day. All right, not getting the needs met. In some cases, it's familiarity. If you haven't grown up eating fish, you're less likely to have it. And so always about doing the try it Tuesday, taste it Monday, whatever it is we're going to do, increase in likelihood is somebody actually will try a food item. So that average omega-3 index in student athletes is about 4 to 4.5. In professional athletes, it's about 4 to 5. In the military, it's about 3%. And the goal is 8%. Right? That's a positive message to give. You don't want to be efficient. You want to be seaficient. And so we're going to find the ways to get more fish out there and into the body. So a 3 for all, right? Lots of options out there. Now, being a sports dietitian, it's just one of those things. There are P charts. That is the look of your urine. There's the color. I think we change that and we make C charts instead. And we post the type of fish. Where do you get it from? What are the options? And again, if you're not familiar with eating fish, you don't know what these options are. And to make it compelling and to have it around so that athletes can actually try. So even when we look at some of the things that might not be familiar, oh, maybe I had an anchovy on a pizza. My husband's family, anchovy, all the time. They would do it every day if they could. I don't let him, but he could. The idea of things like mackerel, we're looking at lower cost items. This is really important as a way of getting more of those omega-3s in. If it is things like oysters, if it is salmon, if it is sardines, it's always about the taste and the try and the why. So these are the C charts that we look at. And then how do we become an aficionado? So let's fish for compliments. Seafood is a go-to and a go-with. Eat it alone, but it's really nice when you pair it with other things. So I can do that salmon burger and I can add vegetables in, and now it's 2 for 2 because I just got vegetables into somebody who wouldn't eat them otherwise. So maybe not seafood in a smoothie, that's really pushing it. But I think that there are other things we certainly can do to pair on the plate. So that idea of pairing with the produce, pairing with various types of grains, Pairing with a potato, that is not only flavor combinations, that adds more nutrients to the mix. So we're hearing so much about the E word is protein, the F word for fiber is important, and that's what these other things bring to the table and bring to the plate as well. We can have the wide net with the variety that we have available. You all know this, the form, fresh, frozen, canned, all of the above, and the flavor, because it is there, and doing different types of seasonings. It's a wonderful thing about fish. It lends itself to so many different ways that we might prepare it. And so the takeaways, we want to emphasize the why to try and the benefits of inflammation, what's in it, or implementation, what's in it for me. That seafood is not only about the protein and the healthy fats and the micronutrients, but it complements and can amplify the overall nutrition composition of the plate. That's a win-win all the way around. So when we prioritize seafood to correct deficiencies, that helps athletes shop. That's the acronym for Safeguard Health Optimized Performance. And so with that, thank you all very, very much. That was my second.
We're going to break for lunch. So if you would write down your questions and hand them over to me, we'll resume at 2 o'clock. And for those online, go ahead and then send your question on the Q&A. But that was amazing, and you're so energetic. This is why you should eat seafood. So for our lunch today, we have James Beard nominated Chef Scott Bruno outside providing a seafood demo. And we are showcasing many of the seafoods provided by our sponsors today. So check them out. Come back here 2 o'clock. We'll get started again. Network, enjoy some delicious seafood, and be Seaficient. Thank you. So welcome back to the afternoon session of the 9th Annual State of the Science Symposium. And we have just a couple minutes to build Q&A from the morning session. So hopefully everyone had a wonderful lunch from our sponsors. The menu has been designed by Chef Scott Bruno with the Brides Collective. It was delicious. Let's give them a round of applause. I'm going to have a conversation with Chef Scott Bruno this afternoon, so you'll be able to ask anything you like about what he's made. They just got nominated by the James Beard Foundation for Outstanding Restaurateur of the Year. So it's very exciting. And thank you for those that are joining this afternoon. One comment, and this is our friend Jenny Chevron she's a dietitian ambassador for Seafood Nutrition Partnership. She just had a comment about communicating benefits of seafood. So she says, it sounds like RDs were communicating messaging to consumers regarding seafood. We should eliminate the mercury conversation altogether.
Yes.
It seems to always come up as a concern whenever speaking about fish, especially when it comes to canned tuna, one of the most consumed, fit-friendly, and most convenient seafood choices out there. Love turning the table to focus on the positive benefits, but I always feel the need to caveat to choose lower mercury options, which it sounds like from the talk this morning, that caveat doesn't need to be there. They also typically discuss the selenium protective effect and the importance of variety. Bottom line hasn't changed. The benefit of seafood outweigh any potential negatives. So that's from Jenny Chevron. So good job, Jenny. Thanks for posting that. For those online, if you have questions, we're definitely using the Q&A option. Another question from online was, for those that don't eat fish, are there alternatives for getting the omega-3s, I think is what they're trying to ask, EPA, DHA? No, okay. No, for those that don't eat fish, there are algal omega-3 options, DHA, EPA options from algal sources. And so definitely look for those. The plant-based ALA omega-3, they convert to the EPA that we heard about this morning, you know, to a really low percentage, like 1 to 4% might be converted to omega-3s EPA. So you need to get a lot handfuls of, you know, plant-based. So you can still eat those and get some benefits. And then I think I had a question from Bill Spiller. Is Leslie still here? Oh, she might be in a podcast. This is from Bill for Leslie.
Exciting content. You can read it.
You said your husband would eat anchovies on his pizza every day, but you won't let him. Is that because of the anchovies or because of the pizza? Good question. When she comes back, we'll ask her. Corey, are there any other questions online? Okay. And then are there any questions? Well, Leslie's not here, so I'm not going to ask you for your questions for Leslie until she comes back in. So with that, did you all feel your brain waves connecting from this morning? Yeah, the gamma, beta, theta, delta, it's all going. So we're gonna resume that brainwave synchronicity. This afternoon, we are so honored to have Mr. Joel Johnson, President and CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. He's going to lead us in a talk on seafood sanctuaries and a healthy America. Joel, come on up.
Everybody hear me okay? Turn on this microphone. We're good? Yes. All right, well, good afternoon. That was a delicious, absolutely delicious lunch. Thank you. Compliments to the chef, and to all the donors who provided such an incredible feast for us. I want to start by saying thank you to Linda, of course, and the Seafood Nutrition Partnership, and all the sponsors who have made this incredible summit possible. This is the 9th year, which is incredible. And also take a moment to wish you all a happy aquaculture week. I don't know if you all knew that. Yes. Right, give it up for me. Happy aquaculture week. That's right, wild and farmed all coming together. So why am I here? First of all, my name is Joel Johnson. I'm President and CEO of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. We're going to talk about a kickoff powered by seafood that's going to extend into the conversations later on this afternoon about behavior change, really, right? Ways in which we can drive deeper engagement with seafood and its nutritious benefits. And I'm going to talk to you about national marine sanctuaries. Anybody here ever heard of a national marine sanctuary? That's pretty good, not bad. Okay, so if you haven't, let me just briefly tell you in a nutshell what they are. Everyone's familiar with Yellowstone National Park, right? That usually gets 100% of it. So just think about that in the ocean and our Great Lakes. National marine sanctuaries are America's underwater national parks, and they are developed in consultation with the local communities, nominated and designated, and then managed by NOAA. They have superintendent, just like your other national parks. They work closely, in fact, many of them are adjacent to national parks. And what they do is they protect marine resources of significant value to the local community and to all Americans. And they can include shipwrecks, they can include coral reefs, kelp forests, humpback whales, fisheries, and you can find them on East Coast, West Coast, in the Pacific, as well, some 629,000 square miles of your public waters, just like we talk about our public lands, your public waters. And they are managed for compatible and multiple use. And that's going to be key here as I talk about a strategy to help improve the outcomes for health in America. So we're here today because we share a mission to make America healthier, or frankly, just make people healthy, right? And what better way to do this than through America's seafood? Seafood is America's original health food, high protein, low fat, packed with nutrients, right? But it's also something bigger. Also something bigger, it's jobs, it's culture, it's communities, and it's a chance to show the world what American industry and sustainable stewardship can do when we work together. That's what the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation calls Waters for All. Waters for All is a promise that our national marine sanctuaries serve local communities, coastal communities, fishermen, families, visitors. And we do that not just for today, but we do it for generations to come. And for me, this is personal. This is a picture of Cleveland from Lake Erie. This is where I grew up. I grew up in the inner city. And my family had access to seafood's nutritious benefits because my father was a fisherman, a recreational fisherman. He fished for walleye and perch, and he put that on our dinner table. And frankly, it helped beat back food insecurity in our family. It also was a source of sustenance. All four of my siblings graduated from Ivy League colleges and universities. Not me, I'll be the black sheep of the family. But it's clear seafood nourished us in ways that went far beyond the dinner table. The new administration has made it clear through executive orders, like restoring American seafood competitiveness, that the US will lead the world in producing, processing, and promoting seafood. We will build markets, we will strengthen supply chains, and we will protect the marine resources that make it all possible. But there's a big if we have the courage to ensure we do it sustainably, we do not leave anyone behind. Back to Basics Nutrition begins with helping more Americans understand seafood is not just a nutritious food, but it's also part of our marine heritage. It's kind of at the root of American prosperity. So yes, we talked about it this morning, the science is pretty clear. A diet rich in seafood helps prevent heart disease, it supports brain development, but it also builds stronger families. Sustainably sourced, it strengthens our workforce and it reduces long-term health costs overall. And as I shared, it can reduce food insecurity. And that's not just nutrition, that's true national strength, not just wonkish policy and rhetoric. So when Americans eat more seafood, they're not making just a healthy choice for themselves, they're making a healthy choice to strengthen America's fishery and the communities that rely on it. And importantly, when Americans visit their public waters to go fishing or swimming, boating, kayaking, whale watching, diving, or just to take a walk on the beach, they're part of that health story too. They're making their own lives healthier while also bringing economic benefits to the gateway communities that depend on working waterfronts and visitors who come to experience those waters. So here's, as I said, some good news. America's seafood story is anchored in America's waters, which are vast, our fisheries, which overlap those waters, and then a small portion of conservation areas known as national marine sanctuaries. And some of these sanctuaries, as you can see on the map, are spread out throughout the country. There's a couple in the Great Lakes. And they all contribute, as I said, to doing a lot of things. They safeguard ecosystems and they safeguard cultures, fishing towns and communities, tribal traditions for those tribes that are and the areas are adjacent, family-owned boats, working waterfronts, all those things that strengthen a coastal community, which ultimately lead back to how we are going to deliver the benefits of nutritious seafood. Every sanctuary, as I said earlier, is managed by NOAA with a very clear process. These include condition reports that track the health of ecosystems, management plans that explicitly consider commercial fishing in consultation with local communities. One of the powerful things about national marine sanctuaries is that they all have sanctuary advisory councils with dedicated seats for local fishermen on those councils. And they inform those management plans. That's a great strategy to balance conservation and, frankly, respect for our oceans and the public waters that belong to all of us. With carefully managed access that center people and balance that resource. So I'm going to give you a few examples. In Stellwagen Bank off of the Massachusetts Bay, this area supports a thriving scallop and lobster fishery. NOAA and the industry work together on all kinds of brilliant and innovative programs. One of the programs I really love is the Scallop Research Set-Aside Program. This brilliant strategy actually is a unique program that sets aside scallops that can be harvested by researchers to generate the funds that go back into that research through grants. And it's produced incredible things like biomass surveys and other types of really innovative research that informs those fisheries. On the west coast, the greater Farallones and Cordell Banks sustain a valuable Dungeness crab and salmon fishery, rockfish as well. Monterey Bay, anyone been to Monterey Bay and know the story of Monterey Bay? Monterey Bay, boy, that fishery was in decline for so many years. But after it became a national marine sanctuary, got better resource management and promotion, we saw a really fantastic rebound of the wildlife there. Still a lot of challenges, but it's an incredible place to visit. Monterey Bay has one of the nation's largest squid fleets. Pretty impressive. You go to the southeast of the Gulf, Florida Keys anchors spiny lobster. Okay, this is something that people travel from all over the country to go into the Keys. They snorkel and they grab those spiny lobsters, they take it home, they feed their families. It's a great recreational and commercial fishery. Flower Garden Banks in the Gulf supports reef-associated fisheries, where we're taking derelict oil rigs, which are great attractors to fishing as species, and turning those into places where recreational anglers can go, and even some who have commercial licenses can go harvest that fish, bring it back to their local fish market, and then sell it. Places like Grays Reef off the coast of Georgia, this is an interesting one. It's a beautiful reef, but it's several dozens of feet down. It's carefully regulated for recreational harvest only, but also fun fishing. And why do I mention that? Because fun fishing is a way to build a connection with the resource that can sustain our love and respect for seafood. Okay, and I encourage you to think about beyond just commercial fishing, how the role of recreational fishing and it can play in driving new habits. In the Pacific Islands, places like Hawaiian Islands, Humpback National Marine Sanctuary, one that's specifically dedicated to conserving the whale, there is managed in partnership with the state, NOAA, and elders from the Hawaiian community. Places like American Samoa, there's a fabulous tuna and bottomfish grounds. These are actively managed with zones designed to protect stocks through longline fishing. And in the Great Lakes, Thunder Bay, it also contributes to state and tribal fisheries. You've got incredible fish, I mentioned before, walleye, that thousands of people locally rely on and put on their dinner plate. And obviously that contributes to their overall health. Under NOAA's management, sanctuaries really just don't protect fish. I mean, you kind of see my point here. They power gateway economies where fishermen, visitors, and coastal communities and businesses can all come together to benefit from healthy, productive waters. And at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, we are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with NOAA Fisheries and the NOAA National Marine Sanctuaries and the fishing industry to make that vision real. We are investing in things like ropeless gear innovation in California. Ropeless gear is going to keep Dungeness crab fishermen fishing and not having to lose expensive crab pots, and also not having to deal with entanglement of whales or other marine mammals that come by. It's a fabulous program. And it's a real example that is unique to sanctuaries. They're sources of solutions. And no offense to my friends at the National Park Service, but Yellowstone can't do this. And, you know, we get a sense that challenging real world conditions that we're facing and putting our fisheries at threat are also driving innovation, and we're going to test it. So it can be done in places like sanctuaries. So another significant strategy that we have at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is marine debris removal. Through marine debris removal, we are pulling thousands of derelict traps and nets from the water so fish stocks can rebound and fish habitats and nurseries can be restored. We also, through our partner at Dell Fisheries, have been able to sponsor the Seafood Nutrition Partnership for several years, helping to create a seafood toolkit for registered dietitians. During COVID, when America needed reassurance, we helped to invest $250,000 in the Eat Seafood America campaign. And we recently were able to renew our sponsorship because we believe seafood belongs at the center of America's health strategy. So we also support the Gulf of Maine Research Institute's Marine Resource Education Program. I really love this one. This grant allows fishermen to get involved in the federal regulatory process, gives them a voice, brings them to the table. And that's about respect. Respect. That and trust build partnership. And we're gonna need all those things if we are going to drive the benefits of seafood as a nutritious source. So for many years, the foundation has also proudly sponsored the Department of Commerce's Fish Fry. And this is the hottest ticket in town in Washington, DC, if you can get it. And it's an opportunity to mingle with fishermen from all over the country, tribal nations, policymakers, and the public, come together once a year during Ocean Week, first week of June, every year in Washington, DC, to taste and talk and remember why American seafood matters. So everywhere we work to keep gateway communities, making sure that those local economies can benefit from the sanctuaries, that coastal cultures are strengthened, not displaced, and that sanctuaries can remain real engines of opportunity. Overall, the programs we have are vast. We have dozens and dozens of programs at National Sanctuary Foundation, but I want to highlight a couple that I am particularly proud of. One is the Gold Clean Seas program in Florida Keys. So Florida Keys National Sanctuary, about 4,000 square miles. We combine debris removal and coral restoration to rebuild lobster and stone crab grounds. And then our trap removal project clears thousands of derelict ghost traps. Ghost traps are when a crab trap or a lobster trap is basically lost. And when I say lost, they get lost in the thousands every year. And that has real impact on the environment. And so being able to remove that debris can help to restore that critical habitat in that fishery. And what I love about this program is that we work in partnership with the public through regenerative tourism. So that is, we invite the public to work with blue sky dive operators to come to Florida Keys and dive with us as we remove those traps. We take their vacation and we add some purpose to it. A wonderful way of connecting people. And I'm very proud, of course, of something that's new for us. We've been adding over the last couple of years recreational fishing clinics in the sanctuaries to help raise up the next generation of anglers. And this is a prime opportunity for us to build a relationship with seafood, with these young folks and these families who come out to sanctuaries like Florida Keys and Thunder Bay. They're first-time visitors and they're learning a lot of new outdoor skills, but through our research, we found that we're making an impact. They say that this experience overall improved their well-being and inspired them to return. I think we ought to add a question there, and you can, really consider seafood for your next meeting. So these clinics directly support gateway communities. They bring people into the sanctuaries to fish, learn, and invest in their local economy. So the last example I want to share with you is something that we just recently did. We're immensely proud of it. The restoration of the ancestral waters of the Kaw tribe off of the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary. They're one of several treaty tribes in partnership with the U.S. to steward these incredible waters off the Olympic Coast in Washington. We worked with the tribe to remove thousands of tons of marine debris. So in this bay, Nia Bay, there was literally a piece of highway that had been dumped there. It was being towed away to be dismantled, but grounded right in the middle of their bay. So this bay was a place where they harvested crab, clams, other type of seafood, and it really impacted the fleet there. For the macaw, their commercial and their subsistence harvests in the Olympic National Marine Sanctuary and beyond, which includes salmon, halibut, crab, and black cod, their cultural identity is inseparable from the ocean. They just are one and the same, and they describe themselves as ocean hunters. So when we finished, as we were doing this project, we actually filmed it. And we created a film called Nia Bay, Restoring Ancestral Waters, that captures this story about how marine debris removal is not just about clearing shorelines, but about sustaining seafood, livelihoods, and traditions for generations to come. We're not going to show you a clip here, but I encourage you to go online and watch the film where it's widely available, Nia Bay, Restoring Ancestral Waters, and check it out. It's really moving. So, my call to action. Okay, as I come in here to the close, I want to ask you, all of you who are attending the summit, both here in person and online, to really think about how we can join together across disciplines, across sectors. Whether you are a company or a nonprofit organization, scientist, a dietitian, a policymaker, we really need to come together to promote U.S. seafood as central to our Make America Healthy Again strategy, to invest in places like national marine sanctuaries and fisheries as economic drivers that can educate the next seafood lover, while protecting our fishing and maritime heritage, right? And invest in the innovative technologies that can keep commercial fishermen competitive and sustainable, and support education and outreach programs like Linda's that will link seafood nutrition with the sanctuary gateway communities and communities all across the US. We have to be smart about it. Back to basics nutrition is based on sound scientific consensus. And then many of these policies are decades in the making. I love that as a community, we're challenging some of those things because that's the source of innovation. And clearly, we have some work to do on the federal regulatory side. But at the core, scientific consensus is what drives this work, evidence-based decision-making in the face of changing planetary conditions. We have to continue to also honor our promises, right? To the treaty tribes and the local communities that we've worked with for many, many years. And we really can't discard those relationships in the name of progress, because trust is what's going to get us to the next generation of seafood growth. When we do this, we don't just protect fish, we protect families, we protect communities, we protect the future of the American seafood industry. So earlier, Leslie said something that really struck a chord with me. If the food doesn't taste good, it won't get eaten. And it's just another way to say, we really need to find more ways to challenge people to see the appeal in connecting to seafood. For me, I think I'm telling you that we have an opportunity to connect people to the source. And that's a strategy that we ought to consider. As I think about the next generation, I think about, for example, my 12-year-old daughter. She loves the outdoors and being on the water. She learned to fish from me. She loves going to the beach, but she's not a big fan of seafood. No surprise. But, you know, I've taken her crabbing in the Chesapeake Bay every summer. And now she's developed a real love for Maryland crab cakes. So I'm very proud of that. And she also sees, though, that the ocean is changing, right? And she worries about it. She worries about the health of our waters. Access to nature creates good habits and a conservation mindset. And that's how we build the next generation of seafood leaders, ocean stewards. So let me close by saying, I believe America can and will lead the world in seafood. Right now, I believe we're 20th in global marine resource production. Yet we have the largest available waters to enjoy. We can do this not just in volume, however, but in values. Not just in profit, but in purpose. Places like marine sanctuaries, these living laboratories with fishermen and coastal communities as our partners, with gateway communities as our backbone, and with companies and organizations like yours, we can champion and secure healthy oceans, healthy people, and a healthier America. That is the promise of Waters for All, your national needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I think we have a couple minutes for questions, both in person or online. Oh, Dr. Joe Hiblin, you have a question? And I'll come up. Oh, Mike is coming.
Considering the importance of getting people outside, it really struck me that had you connected with scouting, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts in America to connect those generations to seafood and to your oceans.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you, Dr. Joe. One of the really powerful things about sanctuary communities is they are made up of local groups, often volunteers, of different kinds. And Boy Scouts of America, now I think it's called the Scouts of America, has been a partner in a couple of different sanctuaries. Thinking about Florida Keys in particular, there's actually a scout camp down in the Florida Keys. And the kids come every summer and they're working on coral restoration. They actually have a small nursery on site, which is brilliant. Imagine getting a coral restoration badge. You know, and they're doing everything else. They're going fishing, they're doing bird viewing, all kinds of things. But they also spend some time working on restoration and conservation. And obviously, I hope they're eating plenty of
So commercial fishermen use some terrible techniques in harvesting, but there are only maybe 40,000 of them nationally. And recreational fishermen outnumber them. They're nearly 60 million. So they don't use the same techniques, but they probably are taking in a lot more fish in total. So what would you say are the three biggest conflicts and challenges that you have to weigh between those different factions that are pulling at your agendas?
That's a great question, and let me try to answer it with a example. So first of all, we're humans, we're complex. Nature is complex. The things that we love, like fishing, hunting, things that we cherish, like our public lands and waters, those are part of our national identity. And one of the things that, again, is so powerful about sanctuaries is, unlike a Yellowstone or a Canadian or a glacier, these places are special to the local communities. They're often nominated by the local community, and then they have to fight with the local community, and then collaborate with the local community, and convince and persuade the local community about their value. And then they go into a long process with NOAA before they might be considered and ultimately designated. And what's brilliant about the strategy of centering communities is creating space for many different voices. And the nomination committee might include, for example, commercial fishermen and recreational fishermen. And then once a sanctuary is designated, a sanctuary advisory council has to have those voices based on the direction of the National Marine Sanctuary Act, which is a law that basically creates national marine sanctuaries. It's about 50 years old. And I love that that's written in the law. That means we can't just willy-nilly change it. We have to commit to it. The National Marine Sanctuary Foundation works on the ground in building education and outreach with partners, helping them to understand the process, but also acts as a convener and a connector. You get those folks together in the room. It's like going to a fisheries council meeting. You're in for a show, right? But at the end of the day, you know what we can rely on? Both the recreational community and the commercial community, they love that resource. So here's the example. There's a great captain down in the Gulf of America at the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary who guides recreational anglers. He knows the waters like the back of his hand. He also is a commercial fisherman. So he cares about this resource on many different levels. He doesn't want the rec guy to come in and fill up his bag limit without walking away with an understanding of how valuable that fishery is to the local community, how it sustains the local community, and understanding the changing human impacts on those waters. I think sanctuaries provide an incredible opportunity for us to address complexity, for us to really have community-based conversations that bring all these voices together. And that's their power. And I am inviting you all as really ambassadors and leaders of the seafood community to learn more about sanctuaries and figure out how to embrace these as tools to help promote nutritious seafood, good habits, access to nature, strong community ties. You know, it's been sitting there for 50 years as a system, very little known, very little unused. And I always ask people, I make this pitch, how would you like to be the one to discover Yellowstone all over again and help make it valuable to the community? Think about that as you approach your strategies to build, a story around promoting the benefits of seafood.
Thank you, Dell, so much. Let's give them a round of applause. Well, this morning we heard about all the wonderful benefits of eating seafood. And seafood is really the last food category that has a wild component. All the other foods we eat are farmed. And so, Joel, you just shared with us the complexities of this community that we're in. Next up, we want to share with you some consumer insights. So how do we get consumers to fall in love with seafood? And we're going to have a conversation with Sarah Crowley, our Senior VP of Marketing, and Jackie Marks, the Senior Manager of Communications and PR for the Marine Stewardship Council. So I'm gonna have Sarah come up first. And for those online, please continue to ask your questions. We'll field them as best as we can.
You guys hear you? How about now? Okay. Talk it on. Yeah. Can you talk louder? So I can turn you on. I can talk louder. A lot. I think the mic. Okay. I'll talk loud. I hope you guys can all hear me. I'm Sarah Brown from Seafood Nutrition Partnership. Thank you all for being here. Special thanks to our sponsors, especially delicious food that we have for lunch. It's just full. It was fantastic. And you know, our mission is to get more people to eat seafood so they can live longer, happier, healthier lives. And in order to understand how to do that, we really need to understand the consumer, understand what they're dealing with, what their views towards seafood are, what the barriers, where are the opportunities, and then how do we develop. How's that? Maybe I should use both programs that connect with consumers and compel them to eat more seafood. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and then partnering with Jackie Marks from Marine Stewardship Council, also talk about the importance of sustainability and consumers' point of view about sustainability and how it impacts their purchase of seafood. Okay, what if? All right, it'll be a little awkward, but I can hold it. Okay, overall, the key takeaways from my portion of this presentation are here. The news is that Americans are actually eating more seafood, so that's great news. They know it's healthy, they know it should be part of their regular diet. So that's great news, but compared to the proteins that we're competing with, we have a much lower incidence of consumption. And I'll show you some data about that. More than three-quarters of the seafood that's eaten in the United States is imported. And right now, as everyone knows, with tariffs and a lot of other things happening within the industry, that is a challenge. So we're facing headwinds. And we need to understand what does that mean to consumers, and then how do we address and continue to drive seafood consumption. And then also seafood receives a very small fraction of the consumer mind share. The amount of money that's invested in seafood to promote consumption versus the pork board, the beef council, or even just major poultry brands like Perdue and Tyson. We're a fraction of that. So how, again, do we break through and remind people they love seafood and have them eat more of it? And so we developed about 2 years ago a campaign called Fall in Love with Seafood. It's a national seafood promotion. And it's one that we've had success with. So I'd love to share some information about that campaign, and then also talk about where do we go from here with promoting seafood and getting consumers to eat more of this delicious, healthy protein. So as I mentioned, 63% of consumers eat seafood. So we're actually seeing an increase versus 5 years ago, we're only 11%. I'm sorry, it's 11% increase. So that is great news. We've got more people eating seafood. But if you look at frequent consumers of seafood, it pales in comparison to poultry and beef and pork that have almost 2/3 or even more than 2/3 of American consumers eating them on a regular basis, which means they're eating them about twice a week. So we're making progress, but we still have a lot of competition from our other protein sources. We know why people eat seafood. They like it. It's delicious. Taste is the #1 reason by far that people eat seafood. The #2 reason is health. They know it's good for them. So we have to communicate the deliciousness of seafood and then underscore the health benefits.
And again, seafood is something that consumers know needs to be part of their diet. So when we did focus groups and online surveys with current seafood consumers, occasional and frequent seafood consumers, and we asked them to agree or disagree with certain statements. 94% of the folks that we surveyed said, I know that seafood is healthy. 93% said it should be part of my diet. So if we have all of these people saying they love seafood and they know it's good for them, why aren't we able to get them to eat it more regularly? How do we maintain seafood's awareness top of mind so they're eating it at least once a week, ideally twice a week? The primary barrier is price. So if you look at these different reasons that people are not eating seafood or eating as much seafood as we'd like, price is the number one reason, 57%. And then this is a really interesting statistic because on the right-hand side, you'll see that if all protein were the same price, so they asked consumers if beef, chicken, pork, all the same price, what would you choose to have for dinner? And the number one choice was seafood. And so people want to eat it, they know it's good for them, but they're really concerned about the price. And it's our job to make it top of mind. I've told a few of you this anecdote, but we did focus groups with frequent seafood consumers. So these are people who eat seafood at least twice a week. And in the very beginning, we just asked them about their meal prep and shopping habits. And we asked them what they made for dinner, and they talked about pork, and they talked about chicken, and they talked about beef. And these frequent seafood consumers never mentioned seafood. Then when the moderator said, what about seafood? They couldn't stop talking about seafood, how they prepared it, what they served their family, new things they were trying. And so even amongst people who are eating seafood twice a week, it's not top of mind with them. And so we really do have to figure out a way to connect with them and remind them how much they love seafood. Again, over 75% of the seafood that is developed in the United States is imported. And the protein that we're competing with does not have that challenge in terms of the new tariffs and challenges that the industry is facing. 1% of poultry, 10% or less of beef and pork are imported. But again, with seafood, 75% is imported. And we're also starting to see the price of seafood increase. So we knew that the tariffs would have an impact, but we didn't know when it would hit and what the impact would be. And this is something we're just starting to see. Again, as you can see, as we're going through the year, we're suddenly seeing that the index for seafood price is increasing. And so a lot of seafood suppliers and brands, they have brought seafood in, frozen seafood, many of them, and they're just now depleting the stocks from 6 months ago, 9 months ago. So I think in Q4 is really where the rubber hits the road and we see what's going to happen in terms of seafood prices. And again, the projection is that they're going to increase. So we have consumers that are worried about the price of seafood, and now we know it's going to go even higher. So here I am being the little black rain cloud. So the rain continues. So when you look at consumers, they really are concerned about what's happening with prices. 96% are concerned about food costs. 65% are really watching what they're spending at the grocery store. And so we've got consumers that are worried about price and overall inflation and how much they're spending. And again, if you look at the top reasons that they're not eating more seafood, 4 of the 5 reasons are price related. And then we have our partners, or I should say our competition here, spending tons of money. So whether it's the Beef Council spending $9.3 million last year, the Pork Board spent 11, they're projecting to spend 15 million this year. And then you look at what we've done right now with a national seafood promotion campaign, Fall in Love with Seafood, at 850,000. And we really want to build that and have a stronger presence. And if you look at Purdue and Tyson, just those 2 brands combined spend $175 million promoting their poultry products. Consumers see about 10,000 ads a week. So the question is, actually a day, the question is, how do we break through? We've got big competition spending lots of money, and how are we going to connect with those consumers? And the Fall in Love with Seafood campaign is a program that is connecting with consumers and driving consumption. When we did focus groups and online surveys showing the creative for the campaign, which I'll show you in a minute, and hopefully some of you have seen it. 77% of the people who saw the creative said, it makes me want to eat more seafood. So we knew that we developed 7 campaigns, we put 3 into testing, and this one campaign, Fall in Love with Seafood, won hands down at driving, or at least making consumers think that they want to eat more seafood. It's a versatile campaign. It's able to showcase many, many, many different kinds of seafood. I'm gonna pull this up right now, just so you guys can see the campaign if you haven't seen it or if you have, to remind you. Again, we know consumers buy seafood because it tastes good. So how do we make the seafood so delicious, so mouthwatering, that when they're going through their social media or they're online on their favorite website, how do we make them stop the scroll, engage, and then click on that ad, share that ad, comment on that ad? And so first we start with showing them this delicious seafood and reminding them how much they love it. And all of the advertising that we do, we are targeting current seafood consumers. And then we have our little cheeky headlines, a little sassy, a little sexy, make it memorable. So for sushi, it's let's role play. We've got, reignite an old flame for shrimp. One of the ones that's not on here shows beautiful lobster tail, and it says, catch some tail. And so, okay, and Linda knows that anytime we come up with a new execution, if she blushes deep breath, it's a winner. Even the catch some tail execution, we had to show the board to make sure they were comfortable with it, and they were all like, go for it. And then it was like, but it is the execution that has had the highest engagement rate. And the second one is let's role play. So we want to get people's attention. We want to remind them they love seafood and then get them to actually purchase more seafood. And we've been partnering with retailers and suppliers to execute this Fall in Love with Seafood campaign. So the campaign's been seen over 130 million times since it launched in January 2024. We've partnered with 5 major retailers, H-E-B, Publix, Weis, Harris Teeter, and Hy-Vee. And we've actually executed a second campaign with H-E-B, and we'll be running our second Publix campaign in about a week and a half in October, and our third campaign with H-E-B in January. So we've had 7 campaigns executed, over 40 suppliers and brands within the industry participating in the campaign. And we've been driving an average return on investment of $4.52. And the way we calculate that is we look at the month of the campaign, they're usually a month long, and we compare the sales to the same period a year ago, and then we look at the change. So we're only calculating the incremental sales, the lift that was received versus the prior year. And then we compare that to how much did we spend. So for every dollar we invest in this campaign, it's returning $4.52 in incremental seafood sales. We're having great engagement. We've had over 200,000 consumers engage with the campaign and a very high click-through rate. So about 3.5% click-through rate. And the average in the industry is about 1.5. So we're excited about the campaign. We know that it's working. And what we're trying to do now is figure out what's the next step? How do we involve more retailers, more brands, and get seafood out there with its share of voice and drive consumption? Here are the suppliers, and I'm sure you guys know a lot of these. A lot of you guys are sitting here in this room. Thank you for your support. So we really do across the seafood realm. We've got fresh, frozen, private label, national brand, shelf stable, ready meals, sushi. Our goal is really to demonstrate to consumers how many options there are for seafood all across the store. And we do find that when a retailer includes brands from all across the store, suppliers from all across the store, the return on investment goes up by about 40%. And the campaign overall lifts the entire seafood category. And then also, I mentioned that we had a great engagement rate, again, demonstrating that people are connecting with the creative. But we were pleasantly surprised to find out that over a third of the people who are engaging with the campaign are younger consumers, millennials and Gen Z. So we've got about 33% of those clicks and likes and shares and add to carts are coming from the younger audience, which is great. Kind of building seafood consumption so it becomes a lifelong habit. Sustainability is obviously a key topic. How are consumers viewing sustainability? How does it impact their purchase decisions? And we know that 64% of consumers take sustainability into account when they're purchasing seafood. And you can see it's sustainability across the board in all the different ways that it's defined. And so I'm going to hand it over to Jackie Marks now to talk a little more about sustainability and consumers and how it's affecting their seafood.
Thank you, Sarah. You guys can hear me okay? Excellent. Great. Well, thank you, S&P, for having me today.
We'll turn you down.
Okay. How's that? Sound good? Yeah? Yeah. Great. Great. Well, hello to everyone in the room and to everyone online. I'll stand back. It's always really interesting to hear about what the seafood consumer thinks, and it's clear that they want to eat seafood because it tastes great. It's a healthy protein, but they're concerned about costs. And Sarah just shared that sustainability also impacts consumers' seafood purchases, and this is where the Marine Stewardship Council comes in. How's that?
It's a really tough thing to adjust. I don't know why.
How does that sound, guys? Oh, it's something.
How would it
Okay, all right, I think we're at the sweet spot now. All right. The Marine Stewardship Council also has some really interesting consumer research that complements some of S&P's, and I'll talk a little bit about why this research matters, why it's important. So I'm Jackie Marks. I'm our PR and communications manager or lead for the MSC in the US, and I'm going to walk you through some of what we've learned from the seafood consumer and our target audience. So we wanted to understand the consumer mindset during a time when cost of living and grocery prices were increasing steeply, and there was instability in markets, global relations. The price of the grocery store was out of control, supply chains, and this is really an ongoing issue. So we did a quick poll of American consumers. This poll was in market at the beginning of this year. So does everyone remember the egg crisis of early 2025? It wasn't that long ago, but prices were through the roof. If your grocery store even had eggs, the new administration was taking office. There was a lot of talk about tariffs. That's where we were at the time that this poll was in market. And so we really wanted to understand how the market, news, and other factors were impacting people's perception of sustainability. So we asked US consumers, should sustainability be a priority in food production? And to our surprise, a mere 8% said no. No, they said no, businesses really need to focus on affordability. And then on the flip side of that, 36% said businesses should focus on sustainability. So we were really heartened by that response.
We also wanted to really understand people's awareness of environmentally sustainable animal proteins. Again, we were heartened by these results. The average American puts seafood on top. This is a shift away from chicken, which typically tops the list of perceived environmentally sustainable animal proteins. So that was a really positive result that we saw. But importantly, a third of people still don't know. That's still a big chunk of people, but we do know from our research that people do care. So that's again where the Marine Stewardship Council comes in. We are a global science-based nonprofit on a mission to end overfishing. Overfishing it threatens marine ecosystems, livelihoods, biodiversity. It's unfortunately on the rise. And our program is designed to try to bring those numbers down, working together with some of our partners. And so MSC recognizes and rewards sustainable fishing through our certification and eco-labeling program. We have a bluefish eco-label that can be found on seafood products in 70 countries around the globe, demonstrating to consumers that seafood is wild caught. It is wild caught in an environmentally sustainable way. It was independently verified for those claims. And so we really offer seafood consumers a simple way to identify environmentally sustainable seafood by looking for the MSC Bluefish label. I know we have several partners in the room that carry the MSC Eco label on products, so we're really happy about that. We really, based on the theme of this event, Powered by Seafood, we want to power people with certified sustainable seafood. So to get back to the consumer, the research on this slide is from our Global Consumer Perception Survey carried out by GlobeScan. In 2024, 91% of US seafood consumers said they're concerned about the state of the ocean, a big increase in concern since the previous study in 2022, a 9 percentage point increase. And 69% want to hear more from companies, so seafood companies, about the sustainability of their seafood, also a significant jump from the previous study. And we do this research every 2 years, so next year we'll see how these numbers have changed, whether they've increased and if they've continued to grow. We also saw that independent verification of environmental claims increased in importance to the consumer. Shoppers want that third-party validation. They also help to increase trust. More than half said that eco labels increase their trust in a brand. And Joel talked earlier about trust and how it builds the next generation of seafood consumers. So I'm going to pause for a moment here, just throw out a lot of stats at you. But I want to reflect on why we do this research, why it's important. So understanding our target audience helps us nuance our message. It helps us meet people where they are, and it helps us support their values when it comes to food and shopping. If they care about sustainability, if they care about the future of the ocean, we offer that to them with our eco label. We really can engage better with them when we understand them, and it helps us work better with our partners to reach them and to drive sustainable purchase. Importantly, we also want to make sure that we support some of this quantitative data that I just shared with you all with some qualitative insights. We really want to hear directly from the American seafood consumer. So we're going to hear from Nicole and Gail. They're going to be sharing their reactions and reflections to environmental labels, signposting of sustainability, and how it influences purchases online and offline.
When you see the symbol, it means the term is planet friendly, with an independent certification to verify it's environmentally sustainable. That's awesome. Yeah, that gets my attention immediately.
Yeah, when it says like sustainable fishing practices, I think that that's really, well, it's one of the features on the page that is most helpful in choosing, because it brings it up a level, it brings it up a notch.
So here we see Nicole and Gail reacting to some of the messages that we include in some of our marketing campaigns, and some of our partners put on their campaigns as well. And insights like these are so helpful for MSC and our partners to understand what matters to them, to the consumer, and helps design campaigns that address those desires.
When you see the symbol,
So like S&P's Fall in Love with Seafood campaign, we run consumer marketing campaigns in the United States to help Americans shop their values and educate them on MSC certified seafood as an environmentally friendly choice. Earth Month is a time when people are thinking about their impact on the planet. It's also a time of year where we know that Americans are eating a little bit more seafood than other times of year. So we've run an Earth Month campaign for the last 2 years. This slide shows the results of that campaign. We do a post-campaign survey, and we saw an uplift in the MSC label's impact on their purchase, on the people's willingness to purchase in all markets where the campaign was active. That's Los Angeles, New York, and Philadelphia. So we saw this increase over the last 2 years when we've run the campaign. So these are some of the examples of how we run the campaign. We launched in-store messaging in retail locations across the US. We've got aisle blades, freezer clings like the ones in these photos. We also ran digital ads. We worked with influencers. We educated through outdoor transit advertising. So these are just a couple of examples of how we've done that with some of our retail partners. But the key is this: simplicity. It's clear, concise messaging. And our research supports that. And you can see here, it's good for you and the ocean too. That's really simple, really clear. It tells people that it's good for them, but it's also good for the ocean. It's really something that people who care about that can get behind. We also know through some of our research that shoppers are feeling really overburdened at the grocery store, especially when it comes to seafood, in a way that it doesn't apply to other proteins. So simple, clear messaging can help guide them when shopping for seafood. So as I said, all of the markets where we ran our Earth Month campaign saw an uplift in the MSC Eco-Label's impact on purchase. In LA specifically, and that's what's showing here, we saw recognition of the label increase as a result of this simple, direct messaging. And so again, our message was simple: seafood with the MSC Eco-Label is good for you and the ocean too. From 41% recognition in March 2024 to 52% in May 2025 after the campaign ran. That is a significant increase. It's also well above the average seafood consumer awareness of the MSC Eco-Label in the United States, which is at 30%. So we can see these campaigns can really have a positive impact on choice. With simple, clear messaging, people do choose certified sustainable seafood for their health and for the health of the ocean. And I'm hopeful that Americans will continue to choose certified sustainable seafood for those reasons. So with that, I'm going to thank S&P again for having me, for the opportunity to share with you all. Before we wrap up, I want to invite you to a webinar where we're going to talk all about the American seafood consumer. We're hosting it later this fall, and we've got some really interesting insights that we've done through some focus groups. And so please sign up at that link. You'll get notifications about when that webinar is taking place. We invite you to join us and learn more. We also love talking about consumer insights. So please get in touch, talk to me or any of my MSC colleagues who are here. And you can also follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to see what the Marine Stewardship Council is up to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie and Sarah. Why don't we just take a couple questions? Yeah, see up here. Come on, Sarah. We had a couple questions online. One was, is seaweed included as part of the seafood category in both of your work? So let me start with you, Jackie.
Sure. Seaweed is included. We do have a seaweed standard as part of the MSC. We haven't done a whole lot in terms of marketing and part of the marketing campaigns with seaweed, just because of availability in the US market, but we have seaweed as part of our standard.
Great. Sarah?
Yeah, we have not had a partner yet. We've talked to a number, including North Coast and others that have seaweed products or have seaweed incorporated into their products. But they haven't joined the campaign yet, but we'll keep trying to pull them in, and absolutely, seaweed is part of the Fall in Love with Seafood campaign.
And for both of you, do you stress domestic or imported seafood or all of it? Sarah, why don't you go first?
Yeah, no, we're Switzerland. Our goal is to increase seafood consumption regardless of where it comes from, regardless of which part of the store it comes from. We just want to have more consumers and Americans eating seafood, again, regardless of where it comes from.
Domestic, imported, it doesn't matter. We're of course encouraging people to look for seafood that is MSC certified with the eco label on it. But so much of our US seafood that we consume is imported. So inevitably, people will likely be eating imported seafood.
Any other questions? Oh, Alana? Mike is coming to you.
Press the thing up. It's all set. It's all set. Okay. Hi, this is Alana Nacker from GoEd. I thought your slide, Sarah, at the beginning about showing the seafood consumption compared to poultry and beef, and I know that there's checkoff issues there. They're getting lots of money. You guys don't have that for advertising. But I also wonder, and maybe this is a question for the scientists in the room, and I understand that we are not anywhere close to the seafood intake recommendation. It's seafood intake as compared to recommendations. But are we getting in our own way if we say eat seafood at least 2 times a week, whereas people are eating chicken, beef every day, and I wonder if it kind of goes back to the egg campaign where, you're supposed to only eat so many eggs a week, and now we've come back and said, no, eat all your eggs. Can we go further and say eat seafood every day? Is there a science reason behind it? Understanding we just heard that you shouldn't worry too much about mercury. So what do you think?
In terms of increase in consumption, our biggest opportunity is with current seafood consumers. And we did some calculations and we figured out if we could get the occasional seafood consumer to add one seafood meal occasion a week, it would be an incremental $10 billion for the seafood industry annually. So I would love them to eat it 12 times a week. But if I could get occasional seafood consumers eating twice a week, that is a huge, huge win for us.
I mean, I get that, but I wonder if we're just limiting ourselves right off the bat by saying just twice a week, you're good. Because I mean, I eat seafood as much as I can, and when I eat it 3 times a week, I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm banking up for next week. I don't know.
Well, the only thing I'd say from a marketing standpoint is we don't say eat seafood twice a week in our consumer communications. We're just saying eat seafood. Here is this delicious seafood. You love it. Let's buy it and have it for dinner tonight. So in our heads, our metric is, can we get people to eating seafood twice a week? So that's how we're measuring success. But our campaigns isn't necessarily, it doesn't mention how many times, it just says eat seafood.
Dr. Daniel?
From DSM Foliage. One simple question for Jackie. Do you have another certification or you are the only seafood certificate organization?
We're not the only seafood certification. We have a sister program, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, that focuses on farmed seafood. And there are other certifications out there. The Marine Stewardship Council has been around the longest. And it is also a global program. So as I mentioned, 70 countries from around the world carry seafood products with our eco label. But yes, there are other certifications.
All right, thank you. I have another question about sustainability.
You only get one.
Right, so this is more important. Is farm-raised seafood has more environmental impact or the wild-caught seafood? Because I assume the farm-raised seafood is cheaper, right? It should be, right? But does it have more or less environmental impact?
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
It really depends. I mean, there's over 1,500 species of seafood available, and seafood, as I said and Joel said, it's the last wild food, and so there's a lot of attention on how we make sure we catch the wild fish and seafood sustainably. So we don't have the other conversation with wild chicken wild broccoli, wild lettuce. This is really why seafood as a wild category is so complex. We have to get it right, because we've seen how all the other categories have gone. And so in farming, it's come a long way. And now we can figure out how to feed farm fish with non-fish feed. We have now the ability to develop algal, DHA, EPA. I think you guys have something to do with that. So now we can feed, I know Vera Merritt of Victoria is here. We can feed seafood with high omega-3, Superior Fresh is here. Yes, Superior Fresh, they can have salmon 4,000 milligrams a serving, so I think we have innovations coming, but it's all up to us to make sure the practices are sustainable and responsible. So it depends. There's so many thousands of companies, thousands of species, and that's why these meetings are important and partnerships are important. I think that's all the questions. We have time for questions now. We're going to move on to the next session, and if we have more time, we'll be able to answer more. So, but let's give Jackie and Sarah a round of applause. Okay, next up, the man of the hour, Chef Scott Druno. Come on up. Yep. Okay, we'll have a conversation.
Okay.
So we were just all so amazed with the lunch that we had today and just couldn't get enough of it. So we wanted to have a conversation with you and talk with you. But this is Chef Scott Druno. He is the co-owner of the Fried Rice Collective. His other partner is Danny Lee. We've known each other for quite some time. The Fried Rice Collective is a DC-based restaurant group. They've got Anju, Trico, I Egg You, your catering company.
District
Catering, and then you have one brand new restaurant.
We just opened a new sports bar called Upstate FTW, which is a sports bar with the regional foods of upstate New York, where I'm from.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on your James Beard nomination for Restaurant. What does that mean? Like, how did you get there, and what does that mean for you and your restaurant group?
Yeah, I mean, amazing honor. I think I've been fortunate enough to win a bunch of chef awards, lose a bunch of chef awards over my career. They're always a little silly to me because, it's just my name, or in this case, me and Danny, but there's, we currently have 156 team members that really make it all happen. Up a pretty face out here. The team is in the back, really doing all the work. So that's point one. It's really a recognition for the entire team and an honor. And secondly, I guess when we were nominated, it's one of 5 restaurants in the country, so it's something. But Danny called me and he's like, "Congrats!" And I was like, "For what?" And it was at 10:30 in the morning, and I haven't really paid attention to James Beard. Well, I mean, a little bit, but not like I used to when I was younger. It was something I really wanted to win, and was nominated a few times, and then I decided that I want to be rich, not famous. So I just focused on building a company. But when Danny called me one day at like 10:30 in the morning, and he's like, "Congrats," and I was like, "For what?" He's like, "James Beard and Angel, who's our chef at Anju, who him and I worked together for Wolfgang for a long time, and we were working together for a long time. He's been nominated a couple times recently, and he was Food and Wine Best Chef a few years ago. So I was just assuming Danny was, saying, "Hey, Angel, got nominated again." But he's like, "No, your restaurant choice of the year." And at that time, I was in our original Chico restaurant in the bathroom trying to fix the toilet. The glamorous life of an outstanding restaurateur. So kind of like, that's, yeah, it feels great. It was definitely a great experience to be nominated with some really amazing restaurateurs that have been doing it for a long time and doing it really well for a long time.
Well, we're so honored that you're able to help support this symposium.
My privilege.
So honored. And we're also honored to have many of our sponsors provide in-kind seafood products, and thank you for your team working with us on that. The menu for lunch and also this afternoon, we have a reception from 4 to 5. It's amazing, but can you tell us a little bit about what your inspiration was in designing the dishes for us today?
Sure. So most of my career, I worked for Wolfgang Puck. Started with him when I was 21. Spent 17 years with him in the fine dining space, and was able to travel the world with him. And I opened restaurants in Singapore, London, Minneapolis, Dallas, LA, Vegas. I was kind of all over the place, and helped run a lot of his restaurants and his catering companies. And one of the first lessons you learn with Wolfgang is to buy great ingredients and don't screw them up. That's basically like if you start with an inferior product, you end up with an inferior finished dish. And so, certainly the partners today made it easy on us. We got into some really beautiful, great seafood, and then we tried to screw them up, basically. So that's the inspiration. But each dish we kind of look at, and our catering company, District Catering, is really a bespoke catering company, and we'll cater every cuisine. Last week someone's like, "Can you make my grandmother's coffee cake?" And I'm like, "Sure." So we make that, and we'll really kind of any genre, any cuisine. So some of them, like when I opened the salmon, I don't know if it's subliminal because it says jumbo lump on the can, which is smart advertising, whoever did that. But I felt like it was like, oh, crab cakes. So instead of doing, a crab cake with crab, I did it with salmon. And that was sort of, the inspiration on that is like, oh, it kind of looks like crab. And then it's like late season tomatoes, and I like basil with tomatoes. So we made sort of a salmon cake with basil aioli and tomatoes. So each dish each seafood we just kind of looked at and we're like, what do we like with this?
You're like a seafood whisperer, like tell me what you want to be.
Yeah, basically, yes. And then a lot of it's a collaboration. For me, it's like the tilapia. Like I like blackened tilapia, just something I've always kind of gone for with tilapia. So it really just depended on the seafood, and then we talk about it with the chefs that that we work with every day.
I think we've known each other probably at least 7 years.
Longer than that. Charity Off the Hook was longer than that.
Charity Off the Hook.
Yeah.
And then we had a Celebrate Seafood event during October National Seafood Month. With really famous chefs around the district compete with each other on seafood dishes. Tell us about your love of seafood. What species do you like? It's a long question. Like, how do you buy it? How do you buy sustainable seafood?
Yeah, we work closely with our seafood purveyors, and they kind of help guide us into, what's MSC certified, what's sustainable. And in the restaurant space, I don't think we're always perfect on that and buying what we should and creating dishes and selling what we should. We kind of keep learning and keep getting better about that. So as to kind of save the seafood and, be sustainable and think about future generations and wanting to have the joy of seafood, down the line, is always sort of something in our head and what we choose and why we choose it. The first thing is really quality, whatever the best quality seafood we can get, that's what we want in the restaurant space. But then the economics comes into play as well, especially at a time like now where, consumers are more cost conscious, I think, than we've ever seen in our space, and I guess outside of it as well. So that goes into as well, depending on what restaurant I'm at, whether it's Anju, which we can charge a little more, or it's Chico, which is more in the fast casual space. Like what seafood can we serve there based on the price point we want to stay in, and then what's the best seafood we can serve at that price point.
Do you have any particular species that you're really into showcasing at this point?
For personally, I love to travel and I love to eat seafood wherever I go. So, the last trip we were in Korea and we went to Busan, which is on the water. So, if you picture Korean barbecue, it's typically done with beef and pork, but in Busan, it's all seafood, which was a really cool experience for me to have live grilled eel right in front of me and, just beautiful fish right there in front of me grilled. That was something that, as someone that's devoted their life to food and, eaten a lot and eaten well around the world, that was a recent experience that was really something different that I hadn't been accustomed to that I really loved. It really just depends where I am. I was in Amsterdam for my birthday last year, and we went to a seafood restaurant. We were at the Turbo, which I love Turbo. But it was like it felt like I was in a Paris restaurant where the servers just hate you and they just like throw the food on the table and like walk away. And so my wife and I were at the Turbo, and they literally just come and just drop it on the table and then walk away. It's whole Turbo. So if you don't know how to fillet a whole fish like that, which I saw a table that was, I think my wife and I were like on a first date, and the guy was like, I'll cut, I would have, but the guy seemed like a jerk. He was like, I'll cut this. And he started like cutting it in half, like through the bone, and I'm like, we had Turbo on the menu for a while, and I used to teach the servers how to fillet at table side. So thankfully I have that, club in my bag. I knew how to do it, so I just filleted it. But it was really funny about, it depends on where I am, honestly. Like to me, when I was in that restaurant, I'm like, oh man, Turbo's a thing, and really just depends. I love a shellfish tower. If we're celebrating, go crush a shellfish tower and hold that bit. Yeah,
Nice.
I love seafood though. And it's interesting about seafood because I grew up in this little town in upstate New York, a village of 4,000 people. So to say that I didn't eat seafood until I moved away, I didn't eat seafood until I moved away, except once in a while we'd go out on a Friday night with the family and get a fish fry. But that was really my only recognition. And a lot of people where I'm from are like, I don't like seafood. And now that I've, been fortunate enough to live around not only the country, but travel the world, it's really unfortunate that a lot of people have that mindset because they've never really had seafood. They don't understand what it is. The only seafood they've had is probably, inferior, and, the methods for freezing have changed now. And, back in the day, I'd be like, I can't buy any frozen seafood. It's gotta be fresh. Now with, flash freezing and the way we're preserving seafood and holding it to be more stable and taste better, I think there's an opportunity to really get it to the consumer that says they don't like seafood just because they've never really had it or they're not really experienced with it.
That's so true, and that's a good segue to our theme for this symposium. It's powered by seafood, and you know that 90% of Americans don't eat seafood per the dietary guidelines at least twice a week. That's where it comes from. And most consumers, as we looked at this surveys from Sarah and Jackie, they do like seafood, but there's a lack of confidence in knowing how to buy it, cook it. What are they actually order at restaurants? They love it, so they know someone else is going to prepare it for them. But what are 1 to 2 tips that you would have for a home cook if they just want to add one more meal of seafood a week? What is there a go-to recipe that you recommend for them or a cooking method?
Well, I have enjoyed like recently in the consumer side and retail that there's more, not only seafood, but products that already have marinades, already seasoned a little bit. Like we were talking to Sarkis and they're like, you didn't choose the Cajun tuna or whatever. I'm like, chefs are prima donnas. Like we wanted like to be like just a beautiful product, and I want to manipulate the flavor. But for the home consumer, that's a really good idea to have it already where this is already flavorful, it already tastes good. Basically like right out of the package. This tastes really good. So I think that's a good easy step for the home consumer that's not familiar with it. But I really think the world is shrinking, and chefs are a little different now. When I was coming up, dating myself a little bit, but there was no Food Network, there was no Google, there was no exactly. So if I wanted to learn how to make something, I had to ask another chef. I had to buy a cookbook. I have this book, The Food Lover's Companion, and I still have it, it's mangled. I'd be like, oh, I wanna learn how to make such a dish that I heard about, and I'd have to really dive deep into like my friends' cookbooks. Now it's like you just Google it, anything you wanna make. So I think there's definitely an opportunity, as long as we can get, really great seafood into the consumer's hands. There's an opportunity to attach a recipe, a video, there's enough chefs talking about seafood and preparations that it's much easier nowadays for the consumer than it was historically.
It's good to hear you're saying that, you actually are more okay with frozen seafood. That wasn't the case before. How much of the frozen seafood do you use in your restaurant groups?
Well, certainly shrimp. I mean, we do a lot of shrimp that, it really depends. Like some seafood, like I was talking about the flash freezing earlier, like probably 15 years, maybe only 15 years ago, I wouldn't have bought frozen tuna. I wouldn't do that. But now, with the freeze methods, it's definitely a different situation. I think some seafood, I don't want to offend anybody, I don't know seafood companies I'll represent. Some seafood freezes well and some seafood doesn't, and we really have to decipher what that is. For us, shrimp doesn't suffer a lot when it's frozen. So I mean, that's off the top of my head. King crab that doesn't really suffer to me. But I've only kind of had it frozen, I guess. Yeah.
And then I guess, well, to wrap up, and I'd love to open up to the audience here and online. We're all trying to eat better, feel better, but also make it easier. And, if you had a neighbor that came and said, how do I actually feed myself better, but I want it easy? Give me, final words on how to make it easy.
Order from Chico.
Good answer.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of it is start with an easier protein, some, like a snapper, for example, it's not the easiest piece of fish to cook. Personally, I don't think it freezes very well. I think it has to be fresh. And then the freshness is an issue, like getting it from point A to point B. So again, depending on where you are and what opportunity you have to buy seafood. I mean, here locally, we use a company called Profish that we would buy a lot of our seafood from them. They have a market that they also sell retail to. So when people want to eat seafood at home, I kind of direct them there, that they can buy fresh seafood. But again, that's, getting the consumer to understand that, some things are fine frozen and.
Reminded me about the candied salmon, just buy a pack of that.
Yeah, just open that up and eat it. Like smoked salmon, it's good. It has great shelf life. The flavor is delicious. You can see today, like the dish we made. A lot of times we think smoked salmon and a bagel, and that's it. But smoked salmon has, really endless possibilities for different dishes and different recipes. And that's already kind of delicious on its own out of the package and easy to. Today we made a summer roll. It's very, pretty easy to make that. It's not a challenging recipe. When you have a little bit of technique, and smoked salmon goes perfect with that.
Well, I'll open up for just a few questions. Are there any questions online, Corey? Yep. Here's your chance to.
No math questions, no trick questions.
Oh, Gretchen might have a math question for you.
Hi, so I want to eat seafood and I really like to keep it simple. So I often have frozen like halibut or cod or salmon. So I'll thaw it out, get it out midday, thaw it out, put a little marinade on it. And now I'm not sure if I should use the air fryer or the oven. The air fryers are all the rage.
Yeah.
But if it's a 1.5-inch stick, it seems I tend to overcook it in the air fryer.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the oven. Anyway, if you have any thoughts on
Yeah, I'm the wrong person to talk about gadgets. And it's funny, like my family members are like, I don't know why they're always like, oh, we'll just give them something culinary, like, so I've had air fryers and slow cookers and I just basically end up giving them to somebody else. So yeah, air fryers are all the rage. And I guess as we're thinking about healthier styles of cooking, that is definitely a way to do it. But to me, if you spend the money on a beautiful piece of halibut, I would put it in an air fryer, but I wouldn't put a chicken wing in an air fryer because I love chicken wings and I don't want to ruin them in an air fryer. But Yeah, I would say, an oven is better. I mean, to me, on a piece of halibut, I generally would defrost it, pat it dry, season it, pan sear it, and then finish it in the oven. You know, 'cause I like a little bit of crust on top of that, to get a little bit of texture. And there's a flour called Wonder Flour, which, with halibut, if you just kind of tap the top of that in the Wonder Flour, then sear it in the pan with a little bit of olive oil. So it gets nice and golden brown, then flip it in the pan and put it in the oven. That's the way that I always cook halibut. Yeah, 350. Yeah, so you make it with the.
That's number.
We can do like a seafood, what is that Batman thing? We'll put up the seafood, 911. Yeah. Yeah, it's in a form of some sort of fish, so. Go ahead, yeah.
Just 2 questions.
Yeah.
Oh, Elaine right there. Okay.
Hello, hi Scott.
Hi.
Thanks for the passion in your talk. You said something about, if you don't grow up getting used to eating seafood, it can be a difficult transition. But I think also seafood is that kind of food that if you get it wrong, you will never forget it. And you're not going back to it because it's terrible. So I was just wondering if you have a cheat sheet or like some tip for dealing with seafood that is about to go bad. Does such a thing
I mean,
exist?
I think you have to trust your nose, and really, if it's whole fish, it's a little bit easier, if it's a whole fish, you can see the eyes cloudy, is it slimy on the outside? How the smell? Filleted seafood that's frozen can be a little more challenging, but it's still, the smell test to me is like if it's frozen crowback, you cut out a crowback and it's defrosted and it smells bad.
Food safety first,
Yeah,
right?
food safety is always paramount for sure, and you're right about that, because I think where I'm from, like, there are some bad examples of seafood and people would eat that, and, my wife's mother, she used to just bake like haddock with a lemon, and probably wasn't the best quality haddock, and, probably wasn't a very good cook method, and the first time you eat it, if it's not good, you're like, yeah, so that is tricky to get first time or new seafood consumers to have it prepared correctly, which, I think a restaurant is a good gateway for that, because we are producing a lot of seafood, we are going through a lot. But yeah, at home, it really has to be safe handling as well, which is important. And, like other proteins, chicken, and like there is a certain amount of safety that needs to be brought into it, but I think it's just trust your gut, like. My wife will be like, smell this cream, is it bad? I'm like, I don't need to smell that, just throw it away. Don't need to suffer that, like, it's okay, just put it in the garbage, we'll go get a new one, so I think it's just trust your natural instinct, and I think we're well equipped to, use our senses to determine if seafood's good or bad.
Few questions here, one from Erica Feller.
Thanks. Thank you for that beautiful lunch. It was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the validation of my choice to just order takeout.
We appreciate that.
But I guess what I wonder is, like, in your experience with your customers, working with other chefs, is there one misconception about seafood that you would want to set straight?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions about seafood, like I'm saying, if you've had a bad experience, or, the cost is too high, like people associate seafood with like a lot of times a premium experience, which I think there is a lot of affordable seafood, and people don't always, they equate that like, oh, it's not very expensive, it's not very good, and I think that's, an issue, like, my restaurant Chinko is a fast casual, but we have, we don't do a lot of seafood, because some of it is price related, but we do salmon and we do, shrimp, which are kind of gateway seafoods to me, and more consumers are familiar with salmon and shrimp, and I'm not sure what the numbers would bear, but people are very familiar with those two seafoods. So I think a lot of it is you can get really good quality seafood and not spend as much as you think you would. You don't have to buy a shellfish tower to get a great, salmon stir fry that we do at Chinko. How many times can I say Chinko? My brand name and the person in the background.
Joe had a question.
Great presentation, great punch. great presentation, great lunch. I may have a tough question for you. May not necessarily answer, but I'd like you to think about. And from a psychiatric point of view, patients get discharged from hospitals. They don't know how to cook. We want to have them to help to eat, food with brain nutrients that's clearly fish. What ideas come to your head about cheap, readily understandable recipes that people with, recovering from psychiatric disorders might benefit and introduce themselves to seafood with?
I wish my wife was here. She's a psychologist. She could probably answer this better than I could. But I think you're all on the right path with some of the pre-seasoned, pre-marinated seafood. Like the salmon cake we made today, I think is a good example. Like it's a great seafood, and we're taking that and we're turning that into basically a crab cake, which is a little more recognizable. People know what a crab cake is, but we're using a different protein for that. So we're packaging that in a more consumer friendly package than it would be otherwise. And I think that goes a long way. That you can I don't want to go the route of sorry if there's any vegans here, but the vegan chicken nuggets and like things that like look like something else but are something else and want to taste like something else. I wouldn't go that far, but there are some seafood items that we could certainly make more approachable, and I'd have to give it a little more thought. But the salmon cake today was one right off the top of the head that like salmon's approachable, crab cakes are approachable. We can kind of do a same prep on that, and then it's not hard to make. It's easy. It's flavorful. I think the most important thing is really having some seafood that's fresh and making it flavorful. And there's a lot of culinary ways that we can impart flavor that I hate to give up all the tricks because I won't have a job if everybody cooks what I do, but there's certainly a lot of techniques. There's certainly a lot of ways that we enhance flavor as chefs that can be, sold pre-distribution, like in the package. And when they get home, it's much easier for them to kind of wrap their brains around. I do like, even me sometimes I'll buy like a pork loin that's already marinated. Because I like that flavor, I like the injection in it, I like, there are certain dishes you only want to eat in a restaurant. If you go to a French restaurant, I always get cassoulet. Cassoulet is like a 27-step recipe. I don't suggest you make that at home. But there are certain things like marinating, and even at home sometimes we don't have the time to marinate like a piece of fish, a piece of meat for 24 hours, 48 hours. We're not thinking ahead. A lot of times we're like, what do we eat for dinner today? And we're not always planning it out. And I think some of those prepackaged marinated goods are a really good way to get a consumer to eat something that's delicious and healthy and doesn't take a lot of work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
We have a video to cook along with you during October National Beauty Month.
Yeah, let's do it. Perfect.
Let's do it. And then Chef Scott will be doing another demo outside at 4 o'clock. So we can't wait to see what our choices are for this afternoon. So let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks,
Few more talks and then we'll you will enjoy the wonderful food from Chef Scott Bruno. I do want to have a chance to just have a special recognition of a program we had this summer. It was the Summer Seafood Challenge, and we challenged each other in the industry to eat seafood 2 times or more. And I want to recognize the top teams and individual members that helped raise over $75,000 for the mission of Seafood Nutrition Partnership. And then also to recognize everyone that brought this program together before we bring up our last speaker. So this is our Summer Seafood Challenge. We had a fun cook along with Chef Barton Seaver. He was in Portland, Maine. We had about 20 people around the country join in on a Zoom cook along. Chef Barton Seaver and also Chef Andrew Zimmer have a cookbook coming out in October called the Blue Food Cookbook. So we had a chance to try 2 new recipes from this cookbook, and it was delicious. So it turned out great, and we're going to do another event. I think this time with Chef Scott Druno. We just signed him up. That's how I work. Actually, so, but for our Summer Seafood Challenge, it went for 10 weeks from June to August, and so our top fundraising teams, and we were going to have the winners here, but there's so many competing meetings this week. But the top team is Team HEB from Texas, Team Aquamar, and Team Portico Cisco. The top fundraisers were Judson P. Reese, that's Justin Reese's father. Daryl Gormley, Jason Driscoll, Tony Downs, and Carlos Munoz. So we were going to be giving them a trophy that we send. It's a fun little trophy with a fisherman catching a fish. So they're going to be having a chance to enjoy that. It was our 3rd annual Summer Seafood Challenge. So it was quite fun. This program could not have been possible without our sponsors. I know we thanked you earlier. Erica Feller is the Regional Director for Marine Stewardship Council. Last year, she was at the symposium and said, "Would you like to use our space?" I said, "Yes." And so thank you, Erica, and your entire team for hosting us. And it's been phenomenal. And Kristen Betts, I don't know if she's in the room. She's been amazing. So thank you to MSC. Great partners from the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, NOAA Fisheries, Cargill. Oh, Gustavo's here, so we get to recognize you. StarKist, the Chilean Salmon Marketing Council, Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, DSM for Manish, GOED Omega 3, MOE, Regal Springs, and Superior Fresh. Thank you. And all of our speakers today, you're phenomenal. And also, this has been in the planning process since March. So I want to thank my team for pulling this together. We've got Steph here, Sarah, Corey, and I think we is outside the manning table. So yeah, it takes a village to pull something like this together. You're our village. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Mr. Gustavo Lara. He is the Managing Director of Seafood for Cargill and also Vice Chair for S&P, and he will give our closing message for A Nation Powered by Seafood.
Thank you, Linda. And I realize I'm the only person standing between you and Chef Scott. So I'll keep my remarks brief, but I do want to start with a personal anecdote. I grew up in landlocked Mexico City in the 1980s. And back then, seafood wasn't just dinner. It was really an event. So things like shrimp, it was a real luxury. And sushi was pretty much unheard of. And even tilapia was a stranger to most dinners. And today, something remarkable is happening. In Mexico City, which is a pork and chicken stronghold, it's now bursting with ceviche bars and sushi counters, and even street vendors are selling seafood like it's just part of the culture. And it's a remarkable shift. And I think this evolution is not just about Mexico City, but it's a signal of something bigger. Because across the globe, and right here in the United States, we're witnessing a transformation, a change in how we eat, and especially a change in what we expect. So I ask you, and the topic of the speech is what will it take for us to really become a nation powered by seafood? And I'm not obviously offering any silver bullets, but I'm also here to say that the path forward it's quite straightforward. We must grow demand, we must grow supply, and we'll be fueling public health if we're successful, and economic growth, and a better future. But of course, the devil is in the details. So if you allow me to use a seafood pun, let's dive in. Yeah. Let's start with demand first, and then we'll go to supply. Today's consumer is really informed. It's curious, it's connected, and they're exposed to more cultures and more foods and more choices than ever before. And they're just not eating and they're exploring. We're exploring. And they're making different choices. When it comes to seafood, the numbers don't lie. The shift is quite remarkable. There's a recent study by Spirit Research. They put out a report called the Consumer Sentiment Report. And it shows that millennials across the US, across all income levels, are eating seafood twice as frequently as baby boomers. Even millennials earning less than $50,000 a year, they're still eating twice as frequently as baby boomers in the same income bracket. Millennials help transform sushi, once and each, into a genuine everyday seafood, everyday meal option. And today's most frequent seafood consumer, you're never going to guess. They're actually high-income Gen Zers. They're not the biggest spenders yet, but they're the most frequent. So there's a shift happening here in America, and seafood is at the heart of it. But here's a challenge. The seafood aisle hasn't kept up. Frozen shrimp and canned tuna and the fish sticks, I mean, these are great staples, but there aren't enough. And they're not enough for this generation, and they're not enough for this moment. We need to meet consumers where they are. One of my favorite books, Revolution at the Table, talks about how Americans changed the way we ate between 1880 and 1930. And back then, we were quite skeptical about food. Tomatoes and garlic, we were quite suspicious about those. And Italian foods were just like four. But today, you know, pizza and pasta are as American as apple pie. And even ketchup, you know, a tomato-based sauce, it's our favorite condiment. And this would have been unthinkable 100 years ago. I believe seafood is on the same path. Millennials and Gen Zers are embracing it. And demographics will eventually play out. Our biggest demand challenge today is actually frequency, low frequency. Because here's the truth, and Linda just mentioned this previously. Even though 90% of Americans eat seafood at least once per year, 80 to 90% of them aren't eating enough. So that's not really a market problem. That's what category managers call a frequency problem. That means that 80 to 90% of Americans aren't meeting the dietary guidelines they now subscribe. So to put this in perspective, seafood's once a year crowd is 3 times larger than beef's once a year crowd, and 4 times larger than chicken's once a year. So what is holding us back with seafood? I think it's price and convenience and promotion together. Because consumers routinely say it's too expensive, or it's not on sale, or I don't know how to cook it. And you know what? I think they're right. Because the industry continues to primarily offer, you know, fish loins and fillets and salmon portions and bags of shrimp. And these are great for the seasoned cook. But it's too much work for the average consumer. So just like most folks don't cook ribeye steaks every day of the week, they won't cook seafood every day if it's complicated or costly. So you take a look at what's available today and what's convenient and what's affordable. I mean, there's some great products out there, don't get me wrong, but if you walk down the meal solutions aisle in your local grocery store, count the number of chicken and beef and pork items you see, and then count the seafood. There are really only 1 or 2 brands that consistently offer innovative seafood meal solutions nationally at scale. So that's opportunity. It's just untapped. It's just waiting there. Consumers want healthy, protein-rich, responsibly produced food. That's seafood, by definition. But they also want culinary exciting quick meals, eat and serve options, drive-through and delivery convenience. They want it all on a budget. So here's my first one. A nation powered by seafood has to have convenient and affordable options, but we must do it at scale. We must be able to compete for consumers' attention versus chicken or versus pork or versus quick service restaurants, eat and serve, snacks, school lunches, as ubiquitous as chicken. We have the opportunity to meet consumers where they are and to inspire new ways to enjoy seafood. Seafood can become America's everyday favorite protein, but the seafood industry must rise to the challenge. Campaigns like S&P's Fall in Love with Seafood are showing us there is a way to collaborate at scale. A push-pull strategy, coupons, promotions, social recipes, retailers like H-E-B and Publix are seeing real impact. We need to do more of this. We need to think outside the box to get on America's plate. But addressing demand is not going to be enough. We must also address supply. Because here's the paradox. Americans consume about 20% of the world's seafood, but produces only a fraction. We have the coastline, we have the rivers and the lakes, and we have the talent. It seems that what we still need is the will. In the 20th century, the challenge in seafood was about food safety. We didn't really have a robust supply chain or cold chain to get it safely to consumers. But today that's solved. You can find safe, delicious seafood, even in small dollar stores in rural America. And I personally had grocery sushi off of I-80 in Nebraska, and it was delicious. So, we do need to invest in modernizing our fishing fleets and our port infrastructure. We also need to invest in domestic aquaculture, and I'll touch on that in a second. We need to partner with nations that already have world-class seafood standards. We need to ensure that our seafood is not only abundant, but responsible and sustainable and transparent. I believe aquaculture is key to our future. And we're making progress in many parts of the world. Entrepreneurs and family farms and corporations, for decades, they've been raising the bar on stewardship and welfare and safety and transparency. Yet, we've barely tapped into our domestic potential. Just as we have the best managed fisheries, there is no reason why we can't have the world's best managed aquaculture. It's not an either or, it can be an and. So here's my second point. To be a nation powered by seafood, we must produce more of it, while also collaborating with and prioritizing trading partners with high standards. A country with 5 to 6% of the world's coasts and 20% of the world's demand shouldn't have to import 75% of this. Because seafood isn't just food, and should certainly not be a luxury item. Seafood is opportunity, and it's new jobs, and it's food security, and it promotes brain development for our children and heart health for our seniors. It is more IQ for us all. Simply put, it is quality of life, and a healthy population is a productive population with fewer healthcare costs and more healthy days. With just 2 servings a week, we have the chance to be a healthier country, and maybe in the process be a little bit happier and a little bit smarter. We cannot afford not to have seafood in our diets. Seafood Nutrition Partnership and the Seafood Nutrition Advisory Council are playing a vital role. The MAHA Commission's inclusion of seafood and omega-3 as contributors to a healthy diet. That's impact. 4 to 5x return on promotional investment with Publix and H-E-B. That's impact. A mutual partnership that can credibly and recurrently convey diverse and leading voices to advocate for consumer health through seafood. That's impact. And at Cargill, we share this commitment to health and to safety and to nutrition. And we're ready to collaborate and to strengthen supply and to help improve public health. Because the challenge in the 21st century is not going to be to produce enough food for us all. It's going to be to be able to eat in a way that protects our health and our planet. And Americans want choice, they want taste, they want nutrition, they want convenience, and they do care how food is made. We need an innovative food system, and seafood has the potential to be at the center of it. So here's my third and my final point, and it's a call to action. We need people like you to step up. We need your enthusiasm, we need your energy, and we need your insight. S&P is small, but it punches way above its weight. So when you get back home, talk about S&P's mission and talk about our success, but also talk about our need for resources. Because today, the seafood industry and NGOs are facing tough times. S&P needs your help to raise awareness and to engage donors, so we can continue to inform and to engage, and most importantly, to continue to inspire American consumers. So thank you for joining us in DC for the 2025 edition of the State of the Science Symposium. It is a favorite in my calendar, and at Cargill, we're very proud to be a sponsor. On behalf of the S&P board and the organizations that we represent, thank you for your support to this wonderful partnership. Your important work gives S&P its credibility, but most importantly, its inspiration. Now, I invite you to continue the conversation in our networking reception. And I just want to thank you all for attending this wonderful event, and I hope to see you again in 2026. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gustavo. Well, that concludes the 9th Annual State of the Science Symposium.